Good morning, everyone, and greetings. My name is Joseph Kearney, and it is a great privilege for me as Dean of the Law School to welcome you today to Marquette University. This room is our Lubar Center, reflecting the generosity and philanthropy of Shel and Marianne Lubar. We use this room to host any number of events. Some of these are internal, moot court competitions, for example. But most of the events here in the Lubar Center look out to and welcome in the broader community. These include our distinguished lectures and conferences of particular interest to the legal profession. They include releases of the Marquette Law School poll, and they include, scarcely to exhaust the list, debates between candidates for office, including the state Supreme Court, superintendent of public instruction, governor of the state of Wisconsin, and the U.S. Senate. On occasion, too, the public officials are here as guests, seeking primarily to learn from others, as is in fact the case this morning with Mayor Tom Barrett, a frequent visitor, occasionally as our guest up here, but also in Mayor Barrett's case, on frequent occasion, to take things in. Mayor Barrett, we are very grateful that you're here this morning, and more generally for the support that you give us. We're very fortunate to have you as part of us here at Marquette University. All of these events, whether the internal or the external ones in particular, are forms of outreach, whether to the legal profession or more generally to the community, and we regard the latter, no less than the former, as an important part of the university's mission. Among our most important events are occasions where we make common cause with our counterparts at the Marquette University College of Education. These have become a regular feature for us, and I'm grateful to my colleague, Dean Bill Hank, of the Marquette University College of Education, for his college's partnership with us. Today's event, taking on the early childhood disadvantage, is one of these programs. As often, our speakers include both experts from outside Milwaukee and individuals with important experience from our own community. To give you a more specific sense of the program and to introduce the keynote conversation, you will hear from my colleague, Alan Borsick, who has been with the law school for more than a decade as senior fellow in law and public policy. His work ranges more broadly here, but Alan carries a special portfolio for addressing matters associated with childhood education, both in his work at the law school and in his continuing frequent Sunday column in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. So thank you all very much for being with us this morning, and without more, Alan Borsick.
As we all know, and we're speaking here to, we've got a group here this morning as Rita Aleman, who does so much to organize these programs, put it, of stakeholders, that I think everybody in this room is invested in the well-being of children in the city and beyond. And as we all know, so many things have been tried and haven't really closed the gap, so many things, especially at the K-12 level. And I think we're at a moment, broadly speaking, when attention is turning more, and appropriately turning more, towards early childhood. That, as we'll see from our speakers this morning, and as many of us know from direct experience, the gaps that we worry about in high school graduation and 8th grade math and 3rd grade reading, they're really there the day kids walk into kindergarten. That the equity issues start and are dramatically emphatically important in early childhood. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. We've got two excellent key speakers, basically each for an hour coming up. And then we'll have a presentation of some data that we put together. John Johnson, our resident data cruncher, and a panel discussion on what is going on the ground in town here and such. But the goal here is not to convince you that early childhood is important. You all know that. The goal is to get all of us to think about what we can do to spark more, to reach better outcomes for kids, to lessen, ideally to eliminate, that what we call the kindergarten disadvantage, the walking in the door already behind. So let's get down to work. Mike Goucher is a longtime fellow here at the law school, more than a dozen years now. We're both getting old, you know. And a well-known figure in town for all his television work, and a distinguished fellow here who is the master of putting on programs of this kind. I'm just the interloper. And Mike will be speaking with Dr. Dana Suskind. Dr. Suskind is a pediatric surgeon at the University of Chicago. Her specialty is cochlear implants. And it was out of that work, maybe I'm jumping into what you're planning to say, that she realized once kids were able to hear, not all of them did as well as others. And a lot of those disadvantages or the differences lay in the circumstances that the kids grew up in. And that led to her starting an effort about a decade ago called the 30 Million Words, which was premised on developing verbal abilities and intellectual abilities in kids, now officially known as TMW. She and her partner, who is a renowned economist himself, Dr. John List at the University of Chicago. Most important for our purposes, I'm told, a native of Sun Prairie. And she was just telling the mayor this means she's obligated, despite living in Hyde Park, to wear Packard gear at times. And they established the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health. She has been a speaker all around the country. I think I first heard about her thanks to my wife, who heard her on NPR and said, "You should get this person to speak here." And so we want to welcome Dr. Suskind and Mike Goucher.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be with all of you. Appreciate the great level of interest that we see reflected in the audience today. Thank you, Doctor, for being with us. And I'm going to pick up where Alan left off and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing today and the fact that you are a doctor, a surgeon, somebody who helps kids hear. How did that work lead to the work that you're doing today?
It is pretty funny to have a doctor, a surgeon, since we're not known for talking a whole lot, to be leading an effort encouraging interaction between parents and children. So I am a pediatric cochlear implant surgeon, and as many of you all know, it's an amazing piece of technology that allows a child born deaf the ability to hear, to talk, and to mainstream both educationally and socially. And so probably about 10, 12 years ago, I started the implant program at the University of Chicago. Started implanting wonderful little kids who all looked like they had the same potentials to learn how to talk and learn. And soon noticed tremendous differences in their outcomes after surgery, with some learning how to talk and on par with their hearing peers, and others barely being able to communicate. And it was a really painful experience to watch, and it really led me down a road to trying to figure out why this was, and more importantly, what I could do about it. And in this sort of trajectory of learning, I'm at the University of Chicago, so there are many, many researchers that I could tap on to learn better what was going on. I actually audited a course on child development. And this is, I won't tell you my age, but let's just put it this way. I'm glad I was auditing it. And I started to learn and understand that the differences that I was seeing amongst my patients after implantation had less to do with their hearing loss and more to do with the environment in which they were born. and that while the cochlear implant brought sound to a child's brain, it was that rich early language environment that was making those sounds have meaning. And it was at that moment that I understood to give each of my patients the chance that they deserved. It was also about allowing the most powerful individuals in their lives, their parents and caregivers, to understand the power of their language to build their capacities.
So you wrote a book, 30 million words. I'm sure some of you have probably read. How many people have read the book? That's great. You wrote this book back, you said you started, I think, in 2013 or something like that.
Feels like a lifetime ago.
Help people, since some people have read it, but obviously a number of people have not, help explain the concept of 30 million words and how that discussion has evolved over time.
Sure. So as I mentioned, one of the first things I did was audited this course on child development. And it was at that point that I learned about a study that was done some 40 plus years before by researchers Betty Hart and Todd Risley. And what they had done, it was in Kansas City, is they followed a small group of kids, but about 44 children and their families, to try to understand what was going on in their early environments that could help them understand differences in sort of school readiness. And what they found, according to their research, was a 30 million word gap in exposure for children born into low-income backgrounds. And that predicted not just their language development, but importantly, test scores and IQ into third grade. And it was that study that first sort of crystallized the importance of early language environments. In truth, it was, and so I was like, oh, this makes sense. Right. Of course, it's only the first step. Then you really dive into the literature and the science, and you realize that it is a way more complicated and rich issue. But the issue really is about the nurturing serve and return between parents and caregivers, which are helping build the capacity, not just language, but cognition, executive function, socio-emotional development, that really builds that child's capacity. So I initially called my program 30 Million Words. I named my book that. Of course, since that time, with my continued education, if you will, I've realized that it probably isn't the best framing for lots of reasons. And so we've evolved into the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health.
The one thing that you've identified through science and through studies and tests is that period from birth to 3 years old, that is so incredibly important to a child reaching their potential. What is it about that time frame that makes all that difference?
Sure. So at the root of it, those first 3 years of life are critical for foundational brain development. Much of our sort of discussions in this space has focused on the issues of education, which really come down to skill formation, learning how to read, write, executive function, all the different skills that make us successful students. But in truth, when you come to the very beginnings, those first 3 years of life are about building strong foundational brain development that allow you to develop those skills. And so to skip that time period is to do the child an injustice, because that gives him or her that capacity. And because when you think about it, when we're all born, most of our organs are formed, right? Your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, they function as they will from day one for the rest of your life, although it goes downhill, at least in my case, now that I'm getting older. But not our brains. When our brains come out, it comes out pretty underdeveloped, absolutely dependent on input to help create those neural connections. And in the first 3 years of life, that interaction, that rich serve and return, is helping stimulate some million neural connections every second. So we're not talking about education. We're talking about building the capacity and the promise that each child has in their brain development.
You say the brain is just so incredibly malleable during that period of time.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. There was something in your book, I think you said that kids aren't really, we all know that genetics are involved in some aspects of our lives, but you kind of say that kids are not born smart. It's sort of what they're exposed to that determines a lot of whether or not they will reach their potential.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we are both genetics and our experience. I mean, I will never say that genetics is not important, but in this issue that we're talking about, children are so far from what their genetic promise was or is because of differences in experiences. Look, my children are at their frontier. They're at, I have given them as much as I can, and that's where they are. But we're talking about a large swath of the population who we don't even know their potentials because they haven't been given all the opportunities that we've given our own children.
So you talk about the 3 T's, and we'll walk through this briefly. Explain to us, give us a brief description of what you're talking about when you mention the 3 T's and why they're so important in these first years from birth to 3.
Sure. So coming back to the idea that it's that rich serve and return between adult and child, which helps stimulate these neural connections. When I first started the program and built this incredible team, and I am only one of many people working on this project, we tried to think about, well, how can we make concrete this sort of subtle idea of serve and return? And we came up using all the science that we had read with what we call the 3 T's. Tune in, talk more, take turns. And this is what we recommend families do with their children, husbands do with their wives, politicians do with each other. Tuning in, well, we all read the newspaper this morning. We need to use the 3 T's there. So tuning in is really following your child's lead, meeting your child where they are, using child-directed speech. Talk more is just as it sounds, using rich vocabulary, talking about the past, the future, and the present. And take turns. Take turns is probably the most powerful of T's. It's having a conversation with your child from day one. And you could say, well, how do you have a conversation with your child? And this is what we often hear when we're talking to a mother or a father of a newborn. Having a conversation means that it's going back and forth. Maybe the child doesn't have language to give back, but a babble, a coo, a gaze is a form of responsiveness. And these conversations have been found by science, which we can tell about, to be the most powerful for really building those connections and creating the skills that we're all talking about.
You say in the book that this can actually lead to children doing better in math, in understanding spatial concepts. Yeah. That's all possible because of this serve and return, this taking turns approach? Yeah,
so what was so amazing when I started my journey in diving into the literature is that we often just think, when you read Hart and Risley and this other work, you think, okay, well, it makes sense. You give a lot of language, their vocabulary is going to increase. But in truth, when you see the science, and it makes sense, this serve and return plus math, using a lot of math and spatial language, actually builds math capacity and spatial ability in children when they enter kindergarten, or improves it. There are so many different aspects of language and interaction that build the capacity, the socio-emotional development, the executive function, all the stuff that we know is important for the educational attainment of a child is actually built by the richness of the environment. And just so you know, I am a surgeon. Did I know this stuff when I started having my children? No. And I think that therein lies the problem. Are my kids okay? Yes, thankfully. But this is important science that is new and emerging. It's not, I think we mistake the idea that embedded deep within our DNA as parents that we love and nurture and protect our children. Yes, that's embedded in our DNA, but knowing the science is not. And I think this is what we're discussing.
Practically speaking, so reading to a child is great. That exposes that child to more words, to that richness of language. But reading and interacting with the child is even better, much better.
Absolutely.
Than just reading to.
Yeah. And actually, the American Academy of Pediatrics recently, came out with the fact that we should start reading it on day one. And as you mentioned, it's not just sitting, reading a book, from left to right or right to left, depending on what language. But it's really about opening a book and having a conversation, and especially in the early years. And that's the best way to sort of build your child's brain.
Sometimes parents have to be rather curt with their children. Stop that, don't do that. Directives.
Oh, yes.
That's not really a great way of building language skills. That child will, at times, we have to say that, stop
Absolutely.
that, don't do it, for protecting the child. But it's not a great way of building that intellect in the child.
Yeah, so, you know, it's a balance. You know, we often say, you know, directives aren't necessarily a positive for building capacity. Do we use them? Absolutely. I think it's more a function of trying to address a larger issue that has negative effects on children. It's really the issues of the tremendous stress and toxic stress that some communities can experience. But we all use directives in any population. But understanding that the 3 T's, you know, are the best way and the most positive way for nurturing your child's brain is key.
How much does tone matter? The way you speak with a child? How much does that matter to the child?
Positive tone is a positive thing for neural connections, and it comes in that tune-in part of the 3 T's. So.
And you mentioned this, stress can be toxic to a child. How much of an impact does that have on a child's ability to learn? Exposure to stress, trauma. So
when you know, they're basically, when you think about the development of the infant brain, the baby brain, it's sort of, the impacts come in sort of 2 streams, and sometimes we sort of forget, I mean, and they're intersected for sure, but we sort of conflate, well, it's one versus the other. There's a lot of, so the first stream is sort of through language and interaction and cognition, and the other stream are the issues of toxic stress, which can have negative impacts. Both fundamentally change the architecture of the brain. The cognitive and language input primarily impact the parts of the brain, the temporal lobes, the language, the literacy. The toxic stress, that sort of part impacts the frontal lobe, the amygdala and hippocampus, the areas that are important for executive function development. So when we talk about in all children, but especially for children born into poverty, those are sort of the 2 streams that can impact the trajectory. And understanding that we need to impact both of those streams is critically important. Sometimes we sort of get focused on one without forgetting the other, but you can't positively change the trajectory of a child without addressing both streams.
Before I get too much further, I do want to ask you about the 4th T, and that is technology. And we tend to think that technology makes our lives simpler, easier. We're able to deal with things more quickly, generally seen as a positive. Is it a positive when you're talking about kids from birth to 3?
So in the beginning of the development of this project, I was fighting for the 4th T. We need to turn off the technology. Of course, my team reminded me that I'm a surgeon and a cochlear implant surgeon, and you know, we told those families they needed to turn on the technology. So it was a complicated thing. But technology is playing a huge role. I mean, any of us can go into the park. I can go into my clinic, and everybody is stuck to their iPhone, iPad, et cetera. And so it's really not just impacted children, but importantly, I think led to a lot of distracted parenting. I'm not one of them, I promise. No, I'm joking, I am one of them. And it has, I think, huge ramifications now and long term that we can't even imagine. Some early research is definitely coming out that it is impacting, you know, child outcomes. But we're not going to be able to say, hey, turn off your technology. That's an impossibility. We sort of approach it as a technology diet, if you will. But I think as technology becomes more and more a part of all of our lives, I think we're going to need to think about also leveraging the positives. Where can the technology be a positive in our individual and societal effort? Well, certainly it can help in terms of developing measures that we can understand how individuals and communities are doing. We can leverage it for helping nudge. At this point, technology can't supplant families because parents are the only ones who can truly tune in and be responsive in that way. But who knows? With the way technology is, I'm going to be supplanted as a surgeon, so we'll see.
So we know from the science that this period of time is absolutely crucial, and we seem to have a pretty good handle on what helps improve a child's chances for success in life. What do we do with that information?
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that the thorniest issues are the issues that we actually know what we need to do? We keep trying to get to the moon, but we can't seem to take care of our own. It's a complex thing. My work in the research center that I run focuses primarily on empowering families to understand both the brain science and the interaction. But this is being done in the understanding in the context that it is not just an individual parent-child issue, but a larger societal issue. Because at the end of the day, if we expect and understand the importance of parents as the key architect of their children, we also have to understand our role in society, in supporting and investing in parents and communities in the right way. So shall I start with the individual level and the work that we're doing?
Yeah.
I always like to couch that because it's so easy to say, well, look, Dr. Suskind, you're advancing this idea that language and interaction and serve and return are key for parents, and you're helping parents. That at the end of the day, then it's just, tell parents to go talk to their kids. It just doesn't work. And so I always like to couch that before I dive in. So the research program that I run, the TMW Center, is based on the idea that we're trying to advance a population-level shift in what parents know and believe about their importance, and for it to turn into behavior change. So all parents provide rich language interaction with their children from day one. When you take a step back and you think about this issue, in this country, as a physician, as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a journalist, we all have systems and education in which we can learn this information and start practicing it. But here we are in this country where we purport that parents are our children's first and most important teachers, and therefore critical for building our future generations, but yet we have no systemic, universal way to impart this information. As I mentioned before, we know that all parents love and want the best for their children. This brain science is new. So really what we're trying to do is both develop programs that help support parents in understanding this information and for it to result in behavior change, but then also thinking about the larger systems in which we need to leverage. And I know you're going to say, this is because you're a doctor, Dana, but I truly believe that the healthcare system and leveraging a public health approach to early learning is going to be a critical way that we can reach all parents where they are. One of the problems of the early childhood space, there are many, many problems, is that there is no established system to reach all parents and caregivers. Right? We have school system to reach children, pre-K through 12, but none to reach families in the earlier time period. And in my thinking, realizing that, almost all children are born in hospitals. Almost all children see their physicians in those early years. And in fact, pediatricians, you have 13 well-child visits in the first 3 years of life. What about leveraging those? So we're developing programs, figuring out ways to leverage both the healthcare system and the established social service system to try to, create a model of what a public health approach to early learning could look like.
So doctors might be willing to share that information in these regular visits to a doctor, where a doctor could explain the importance of this rich early language environment. Something like that would work?
Yeah, I mean, I think doctors can play a huge role, but it's also the system, right? I mean, it takes a village, and you know, it can be nurses, medical assistants. It could be a novel individual that we say is this new healthcare navigator. We don't know, you know, I can't say exactly, but it's going, you know, it's about leveraging that system per se.
So another possibility would be home visits, for instance.
Yes.
Is that something that could work, interventions in that way? And when I say intervention, I should point out that and you're very emphatic about this, that parents and caregivers are very much a part of the process of how do you speak to parents and caregivers. They give you input, they give you feedback on how that could work, how that's most effective, because that's the key. If a parent tunes you out, or a parent says, who are you to tell me how I'm going to raise my child, then that's a problem.
Yeah, I think that is at the core of everything. Parents are truly the key architects of their children's brain development, and unless they are not just partners, but the center of all that we do and the leaders, you can forget it. And so at least, I mean, in our program, you know, when we say developing programs, it's not, I mean, it would be a problem if a surgeon was the one who's actually doing it. I'm part of it because I enjoy it, but parents are fully part of developing each and every program. They don't just give feedback, they actually helped develop programs. And so it's important to understand that this is not about telling parents what to do. I mean, definitely not. This is about imparting the brain science that is new and novel, and allowing parents to know the best and different ways that you can help build your child's capacity. I've never met a parent who doesn't want the best for their child. It's up to them, you know, what you do with it.
So are there cities around the country that already have programs in place that sort of practice the principles of which we've been discussing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a huge tide that is occurring in early childhood around this idea about leveraging the healthcare space, about putting parents and caregivers at the center. In truth, you know, for so long when you talked about early childhood, parents were part of the equation. They were certainly not the center. We were often talking about early childhood education programs, which are incredibly important, right? We're a full workforce society. They too need this information, but parents weren't at the center, which I think they need to be.
Scaling up, you know, to really make a difference, and certainly a difference in any child is a good thing, a positive difference. But to do it on a larger scale, that's really the big question, isn't it? How do we do this in a bigger, more robust way?
Yeah. So I can answer that question in two ways. So when you're talking about the scale-up effect and the science of scaling, that's the idea that, I mean, I'm a research scientist. Many people who are developing programs are developing it in these rigorous trials to say, hey, look, we developed, let's say, Perry Preschool Project or Abecedarian. How many of you all know about Perry Preschool or Abecedarian? Yeah. So for all of you who don't know, these were early childhood programs that were studied years ago that Professor Heckman, who's an economist at the University of Chicago, has studied in detail to show that, look, early childhood makes good economic sense. And they showed, you know, from $7 to $12 return on investment for every dollar invested in early childhood programs. But the issue is these programs were done with 100+ kids. We're not talking about the 30 million children that we need to reach. This was done on a very small level. And so when you talk about the scaling and the science of scaling, to be able to take that information and scale it worldwide, we need a new science. We need the science of scaling. And it's a very, an important burgeoning topic that many of us are working on. So that's one thing, understanding that what you find on the small scale doesn't always translate into the large scale. So in Milwaukee, when you say, look, I want to do these new programs, it's not just about doing them and saying, okay, well, that's the outcomes that they got in their study, so we're going to have it here. It's about understanding that often the impacts decrease when you go on the large scale for lots and lots of reasons. And just being intentional and understanding this and having the right infrastructure and data so that you can measure it and keep trying to improve the outcomes. Because after all, if you're going to expend important dollars on it, you want to make sure you have the ROI. So that's one scaling, the science of scaling. And then there's the scaling of how do we get this population level shift? How do we get the country to understand that, that education shouldn't start on the first day of school, but the first day of life? And that's about all of you all being here and understanding the importance and sharing it in your community, voting in the way that really invests from day one in parents, communities, and children. So.
What's realistic for I'll let you kind of dream a bit about a future that you'd like to see. What's realistic for a place like Milwaukee or for some of these cities that have achievement gaps that we see in our kids later on in life? What can we do to address that? I mean, what's realistic for us? What would you like to see?
Yeah.
That might be a different thing. What's realistic and what you'd like to see?
What is realistic? I mean, I think what is realistic is understanding that every child is born with a promise, and it's his or her right to have that healthy brain development from day one, and that it's our responsibility to think intentionally about how we make that happen. And how we make that happen, there's no simple ways, but I think it's about really bringing together across disciplines and domains experts from, the fact that we're here to law school says a whole lot. Right? It's not just about people in early childhood. It's people from the business community. It's people from healthcare. It's people from education, criminal justice, all coming together to say, okay, what do we need to do to help optimize our children's brain development? Understanding that at the end of the day, early childhood, I hate to say this, has less to do with the children than the adults in their world. And optimizing their world so that they can better invest in their children is going to be a key. We could spend the next 20 hours talking about how to build that structure. I have lots of things in my mind, but, bringing together people across disciplines.
I hear you really saying that this is, in some respects, a civil rights issue. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, a civil rights issue, it's a human rights issue.
Public health issue.
A public health issue. Because I think that we need a reframe. This is not about education per se. This is about fundamentally a child's right to have healthy brain development. We talk about genetics versus, environment, but the truth is his or her genetics gave him or her the promise of a certain brain development. Because of the lottery of life, that hasn't always happened. And I think understanding that it's their right, and it's for the betterment of Milwaukee. I always say that early childhood goes against all of human nature's natural instincts, right? We like to, I'm married to an economist, so I've learned all about the cognitive biases that make us look like we're making poor decisions. There's something called present tense bias, right? We would rather have a smaller gain now than invest in the future. It's not just early childhood, it's everything, but it's just early childhood. Really, you need long-term thinking. You need a long-run game. It's about confirmation bias, right? We all have certain prior beliefs on what is good parenting or what individuals are about, which prevents us really from allowing all children their opportunity. But it's, if we go in with open eyes and come together, that's, I guess, the first start.
And you touched on this, but I'll go back to it. This is also about social policy to some extent. And about, as you mentioned earlier, what the business community can do to help support these efforts.
Yeah.
In what sense?
Yeah, so, let me answer the business community effort. We actually met at a laundry care summit. I'm sorry, tell me your first name. Tracy? Yeah, so sorry. Tracy and I actually met at a couple years ago at a laundromat summit, which sounds like the craziest place to be giving a keynote, especially because I'm terrible at laundry. But what it was a collaboration between an organization, Too Small to Fail, that is very similar to what we're doing, and the Laundromat Association. And they had come together to say, well, you know, so many of the families and communities that we want to partner with often frequent these places. And they came together and realized that they could help both advance the science and the work, so parents could all understand this. And it was a really robust experience. But what was really cool was seeing that these business people took on the mantle of early childhood, both as it was really great business, right? Because people came in more. They said, oh, look, these are great places. My kids can play, and I can do my laundry, and the kids can get smarter. So it was good business. But I think importantly, businesses are understanding more and more that, you know, their future workforce, and I hate to say it this way, are right now 0 to 3. And if they want a strong workforce, that it's in their best interest to invest early. You know, gone are the days, you know, we are becoming, our economy is changing. It's much more an information-based economy. The importance of education has taken on a much more significant role. And I think that I'm so heartened when, you know, businesses, small and large, understand that importance. And in fact, the Business Roundtable, which is a large national organization, has really taken on this idea. Not just early childhood, but, you know, improving the well-being of all their employees. But for me, that's also early childhood, because as we said, early childhood is less about the children than the adult in their lives. And when we invest in the right ways, when we understand the impact of unstable work, unstable schedules on not just the individual parent, but you actually see scientifically demonstrated impacts on child outcomes, where parents who have unstable jobs, not jobs, but schedules, their children have more externalizing behavior, poor educational outcomes. So understanding all that we're all in it together. I mean, they always say, it takes a village, but it truly does, to understand that at the end of the day, it's all going to change or improve or worsen the outcomes of our youngest citizens. So.
And the social policy aspect of it? So
social policy, so I think that social policy can and should play a huge role. We're the only developed nation not to have paid parental leave. I mean, that's just seems a little crazy. So I think that we talk a lot about the importance of parents and children, but I don't think we invest necessarily in that way. So I always say, if I could just reimagine social policy so that it is reimagined through the lens of early brain development and brain science, I know all the things that I would do. But
you have a list.
But I'll stay in the operating room, don't worry. So.
Let me take some questions from the audience. We've got a lot of people in this room who are passionate about this issue. If you have a question and you're seated in the seating bowl, please press down on the black little device you'll see on the desk in front of you. Just keep your finger down on that and we'll be able to hear it. If you're in the back and you have a question, Eric has a microphone. He'll be glad to hold it for you while you're asked your question. And if you can keep the questions brief, we'll get to as many as possible. So we'll start right there.
Thank you. I so appreciate your focus on a public health perspective towards education. My question is, to what extent are physicians trained or educated in education?
Oh, yeah. I love that question.
Great question.
So, because I actually have data on that. Because don't forget, I am a scientist. So we actually, two things. We've developed a tool called the Speak, which is a tool that explores parents and providers' knowledge and belief of children's brain development. And we actually, when I gave a talk at the American Academy of Pediatrics, we gave it to a number of pediatricians. And so I can't tell you broadly what they know, but I can tell you that those pediatricians who knew more about how children's brains develop, because it's not necessarily part of residency or medical training, were more likely to start talking about the importance of language and interaction and brain development from day one than those who didn't have that background. And there's a huge push for increasing sort of this educational component in medical schools and in residencies. Because there's another part of your question that you didn't ask that I'd like to answer, is how much do pediatricians talk about these issues with parents in the early years? There's something in well baby visits, there's something called anticipatory guidance, which is sort of the education part of what pediatricians are talking about. Car seats, eating, sleeping, pooping, etc. And what we find is that pediatricians in those early years, especially like in the first year of life, focus more on the physical. And it's probably driven also by parents. It's about sleeping, eating, how regular they are. They talk very little about the impacts of language and cognition and brain development. So I think that's a huge focus that we can shift. So I'll end it there.
How would you shift that? Would you go to, for example, we have major health providers in this city here in this area. Would you go to them and say, look, here is a proposal for something that could be said to these doctors, and we bring them together and we share this information with them? How would it work?
Yeah, so we're actually developing sort of a comprehensive, sort of ready-to-learn clinic approach. And I have amazing colleagues who are doing things that are similar but different. But what we've done is we've developed both an educational curriculum that can be, that is leveraging technology, because let's face it, pediatricians are super busy. We're also we're encouraging pediatricians to get involved by actually using that tool that I mentioned, the Speak, to give pediatricians feedback on what parents know and believe, and helping give them little tips on what to talk to their parents about. Because just because you're from one socioeconomic group or another doesn't mean that you do or don't know this information. And allowing pediatricians to better understand what their families know and understand, we believe, can help sort of nudge them into talking more, nudge us into talking more. So we have sort of a strategy around the pediatric clinic, and as well as maternity wards. So.
Let's take other questions. I see a hand up here. Eric, you want to?
I want to say thank you for being here, because this is really important. What I'm wondering is, once low-income families receive the information and understand the importance of the science behind brain development, even in the context of their toxic stress, which remains, let's say, do they use the information? Are they able to use the information to help develop their children's brains, even in spite of those stresses that still remain?
So to be clear, as in every group, there are those who know, coming in. I want to emphasize, just because a parent is from a certain population, just because they're poor, just they're rich, doesn't mean that they're all the same. There's huge heterogeneity and variability in all groups. So that's a really important thing to emphasize. And so that's the research that we're doing. On a whole, I can tell you certain of our programs, the more in-depth, our home visiting programs, have huge impacts on parent knowledge and behavior. So it's sort of a dosage effect. So we're taking a public health approach. So our programs we have the lightest dosage is basically a video that parents get on the maternity wards. We've got then the next layer of dosage, which is in the pediatrics office, and the highest dosage in like home visits. And so this sort of tiered approach, we hope in the future, we'll be able to better understand who needs what and why. Can I tell you, oh, this swath of the population, they need this versus that? No, that's really what the science is about. It's better personalizing what families need. It's sort of like when you go to see your doctor, they personalize it, and that's what we're trying to learn. But yes, I am completely in admiration of so many of these families that despite everything are doing what they're doing for their families and their children. But it shouldn't be that I have admiration for them. It should be that we as a society should make it easier on them so that they can actually do what every parent wants to do, which is giving their child the best start. So.
Other questions?
I have my hand up over here for
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get out of the way so she can see you.
Hello.
When you do research and even when you break things out, I guess I don't know how much you know about.
You're fine. We can hear you.
How much you know about Milwaukee? And Milwaukee just had this 3 weeks ago now that declared it again the worst place for African Americans to live is in the city of Milwaukee. Casey Foundation has said it's the worst place for African American children.
Yeah.
What I see happening, unfortunately, too many times is when people get new information, they see themselves decolorizing it and saying that, this will work for everybody, whatever their research is. I mean, I've looked at a lot of the biogenetics that's come out now in terms of dealing not just poor kids, but then you have a layer of the cultural aspects of what kids are. And I don't see a lot of pediatricians or other doctors, period, delineating what parents and other people need to hear that makes sense to them. And that's why they ignore it a lot of times. It's defined as, well, they don't care, or they're too dumb to know. But really, most of the messages is coming from people who don't understand where the message is going. And I'm just wondering, even in terms of what you're doing with your work, do you think about that? Have you talked to people about that? Because it really does make, I'm born here in Milwaukee, been here all my life. Wanted to go a few times, but ended up staying, so I guess I'm still here. So I really love a lot about this city, but one of the things that really continues to be, this room is indicative of Milwaukee. The kids you're talking about are going to be primarily 90% the opposite of the folks who are in this room. And then these folks that get trained, they go places, they think they know everything about what ought to happen in the black community when they really don't. The resources go to most of them, and not the people who are here and know what should go on. So I'm just wondering, like I said, even, have you seen that, and looking at health care versus health disparities, the health disparities are what happens in the health care, but it's all broken up. And so you see things, and I'm thinking about when my grandson who's 8 now, but when we put him in a preschool, we had to take him out because they labeled him right away as having problems when he was 3. And actually one of the black people working in there told us, get him out of here because they're getting ready to track him, which I appreciated, but I also know that didn't just happen with us. I mean, I appreciate the person said this, and I know this may be, I'm just kind of putting it out there, more of a larger environmental piece. Have you thought about this? Do other people think about this? Do they still generically just think, we just know whatever we got to do and don't consider, because even when you look at groups of poor people, whether they're white and they're poor, and whether they're Hispanic or African American, whatever, Hmong and they're poor, those things, those cultural dynamics are the strengths many times and not just the risk. And I think that gets missed sometimes.
First of all, have I thought about this? It's all I think about. First of all, the larger issue that I always say, if we had the ability to have the lottery, when you think about the lottery of life, that in this country, if you're born black or brown, you have a 65% chance of being born poor. It's a lottery ticket that none of us would want to buy. And it is a much larger issue. And what we're talking about today is a much larger issue. That's why I keep couching it in, look, whether you're black, brown, Hmong, from Milwaukee or, Mozambique, at the end of the day, how children's brains develop is the same. It's a universal. It's about the interaction between adult and child. But it is couched in the complexities of environment. And unless we understand, acknowledge it, strengthen, and understand who are the architects. I think part of the problem is that the science is pretty clear. Parents and caregivers are the key architects of our children's brain development. But if we don't support and strengthen those architects, well, the house that's being built isn't going to be as strong. So in our own work, yes, it is something that we think about, that we partner with, that we incorporate in all that we do. There are no, if we adapt, you can't be all things to all people, but certainly when we develop a program, let's say in Spanish for English language learners, it looks, we still impart the same science because how children's brain develop, it's not different if you're from different ethnicities, but how parents synthesize it, process it, is different often. And I'll give you an example. So, believe it or not, there's executive function, a child's ability is shaped, can be strengthened by being bilingual. So children who know English and Spanish or Chinese and English have stronger executive function skills on average. At least that's what some of the research shows. And in our developing the home visiting program for people who speak Spanish, we wanted to incorporate this idea. But for me, what would be compelling is, oh, yes, I want my child to be bilingual because that'll help their executive function skill. That did not resonate with the families that were helping build the curriculum. They said, well, we came to this country because we want them to speak English. And we were like, no, executive function skills. They're like, we don't care. When we talked about, look, being bilingual will give you better job opportunities for your child in the future, that's what resonated. And so understanding the families that you're partnering with and what's meaningful, important to them is critically important. Every parent loves their kid. Every family has strengths. It's about understanding them, leveraging them, and supporting them. So I didn't answer your question, but I want change for Milwaukee, for you and your family.
Let's take another one or two questions, then we'll wrap things up. Yes?
I'm really glad you brought up language, because I was thinking about code switching and how much we don't think about it in the same terms as executive function. That if I'm hearing, this is the language, the dialect, the way that I have been raised to speak, and then I'm told by a provider, an educator, someone outside of my community that says that isn't the right way to speak. So I have a 3-year-old foster child, and I was worried that he had some speech impediment issues. And the biologic mom said, that's the way that our family talks. And I thought it was more valuable for my little person to speak in a way that was important to his biologic family, knowing that there was some impediment to his being kindergarten ready. And so when we think about racial issues again in Milwaukee, this is just so underlying, is that in some ways, I, a white person, I don't have a white foster child, am I imposing these values that are not actually the values? And in some ways, do we structurally continue to disenfranchise because it's not the acceptable way of speaking? It's not the acceptable way of writing, of learning. Or when we get to college level, and we have kids who have functioned in one side of school district, and then they go to a different kind of collegiate like Marquette. Do we even further these disparities, these inequities? And is that necessarily wrong?
So first of all, the science, I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but the science is pretty clear that children should be exposed to their parents' native language or how they speak. Because really, as I mentioned, this is about building the strongest brain possible. It's not just about developing English. Because once you build a strong brain, it sets you up to speak the way, your family speaks, or speak, the way the education system is also teaching you. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question other than, it is really about what parents bring to the table and leveraging that power. So
I'm going to wrap things up. A final question. You're working on another book. Can you give us a hint as to what you're thinking about?
Well, it's going to be driven by the power of parent stories, and it's hopefully going to be imagining what an early childhood landscape could look like, which is framed by the brain science that we talked about. And I wanted to mention one of the family stories because it actually has to do and intersects with law, and that's why I was really excited when I was invited here. And dealing with the mass incarceration that happens in this country. Because when you think about mass incarceration and the huge tragedy around there, we think about the individuals who are being incarcerated, which obviously is tremendous. But for me, it's as much about that as it is an early childhood issue. So I'll tell you the story of this one young man, Michael. Well, the young boy is Mikeon. And I came about his mom was part of TMW and is part of interviewing families for this next book, because they're going to be the ones who drive the stories. They're to both understand the power of these families as well as what we need to do in our society. I came upon the dad's story. He had been incarcerated from the time his partner was 2 months pregnant on murder charges. Incarcerated, it turned out, for 5 years before he finally went to trial and was ultimately exonerated for a murder that had been done 6 years ago. I mean, it was a crazy story. But his story made me start thinking. It made me start thinking not just about him, which is important, but his son, Mikeon. And that when society takes away the promise of this father, we're not only taking away his opportunities, but his son's. And what role society plays in both ensuring these children have healthy brain development, but importantly, not taking away their right to having their families. So I only tell that story because I'm here at a law, at an impressive law school, and that we're working with Michael to both bring a civil rights case for him as well as his son, because I think they both were done a huge injustice. So,
Dr. Dana Suskind, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us today. Thank you.
I would certainly add to what Mike said, to thank Dr. Suskind. I didn't want to mention it beforehand, but she's actually pedaling her bicycle uphill a little bit today as far as how she's feeling. But she showed up anyway and did a great job, so thank you very much for being here. We need just a minute or two to turn around here for Professor Magnuson, so bear with us. But we're not going to take a break at this point. We will after Dr. Magnuson's remarks. And she's coming on as soon as she's mic'd up there. In fact, I'm going to begin to introduce her. I think that's what I'm going to do. If I talk long enough. A name that will resonate with many of you is Sister Joelle Reed, who, as I bet you know, the legendary president of Alverno College, and just a really strong presence in Milwaukee and making Milwaukee a better place. She died, I think it's about 2 years ago now. And she was a regular participant in these conferences at the law school. So Sister Joelle called me, I bet it was 5 or 6 years ago, and said she had, I don't get everything from television or NPR, but she said she had seen a guy on PBS the night before named Dr. Jack Schoencroft from Harvard, who's an expert on early childhood. And she said, you should get him to come to Milwaukee. And so I checked into this a little bit and said, I thought that would be cool. So I got in touch with his people at Harvard. And they said, it's just never going to happen. He's way overbooked, and he's not a young guy. But why are you asking him? He says, there's someone right next door to you who's just as good, who's really smart, and who's a close partner of his on things, and that's Professor Katherine Magnuson from UW-Madison. So I held on to that name for a bit, and another little thing, I watched on YouTube for some of her appearances, and I said, yeah, this would be excellent. Dr. Magnuson is, let's get her titles correct here, she is the director of the Institute for the Research on Poverty at UW-Madison. Her research focuses on the well-being and development of economically disadvantaged children and their families. She has a Ph.D. from Northwestern, which in the course of that, she's told me she did do some work in Milwaukee in past years and has some familiarity specifically with Milwaukee. She has numerous professional involvements, including with Dr. Sean Kruff and the National Forum on Early Childhood Policy and Programs in the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard. And we are honored to have Dr. Magnuson join us. She's going to talk for a bit here on some of the research on this field, and then I'm going to ask her a few questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So let's welcome Professor Katherine Magnuson.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Marquette for putting on such an important event. This really seems like a timely and important conversation. And I want to acknowledge a lovely introduction. I have spent most of my professional career studying poverty in America. I started that right here in Milwaukee. As a graduate student, I would drive up from Evanston and worked on the evaluation of the New Hope Project, which many of you might be seeing nodding heads. And so what I'm completely aware of is that while I've spent my academic career studying poverty, many, if not probably most of you in the room, have been thinking about this just as hard as I am, and also working on it here in your own community. So what I hope to do is give you some framing comments about sort of what we know about early childhood development and poverty. I know Dr. Suskind talked a lot about brain development, so I'm going to say less about that and more about sort of the big picture of poverty for children in America. And then I hope to have a good conversation and most importantly get you all thinking and talking with each other, because I know you've been doing this for a long time and it's a great venue to continue that work. So that said, I'm going to tell you something you probably already know. This is a report, this is pulled from a report that my colleague Tim Smeating did, and the cutoff on the top line is because I just stole it on a screenshot from his PDF. Poverty is alive and well in the US. About 21% of children are poor. And we also know that it's concentrated in particular areas. And unfortunately, as you all are well aware, it's concentrated in Milwaukee County and in downtown Central City, Milwaukee specifically. So while, based on this measure of poverty, the state average is 10%, overall in Milwaukee, it's 21%, twice as high, and 3 times as high, as you can see in the middle figure, for African American children in Milwaukee. So it's important to keep in mind, and this is why an event like this is so important, that poverty is real, and it's been part of this community and part of many communities like this for a very long time. Unfortunately, we know that growing up in poverty is associated with school achievement. And the reason that this is important is because it's test achievement scores, it's things like grade retention, special education placement, literacy levels, IQ, high school graduation, and college attainment. Now, this has probably always been true, okay? It's always been the case that schooling has been strongly predicted by one's economic standing as a youngster. What has changed and what is critical to understand is that the link between schooling and earnings is different now than it has ever been before. Why? We're now in an information economy. It is very hard to find good jobs that pay well, that don't require a high level of skill in schooling. And that is different than 50 years ago, than even probably 25 or 30 years ago. So it makes the premium of getting low-income children to graduate from high school, to get some completed college, even more important, okay? And the reason that I focus on early childhood, right, if I cared about poverty, and I do care about it at all points in the life cycle. I don't want you to think I only think about little kids. But a lot of people will focus on college, right? Let's get them at 16, 17. Let's make sure they graduate and get to college and graduate from college. The reason that I focus on the first 5 years of life is because what we know is those inequalities that we see at 16, 17, or 18 are present when kids enter school. Those first 5 years forecast what comes later. So these are just differences between high and low income kids. It's two cohorts of kids. What I just really want you to focus on, I love numbers. Those of you that know me in the room know I love my numbers, but I'm going to be easy on, I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds. The largest differences between low income and higher income children are in academic skills, okay? And the difference that those two high bars show, is there a light? There's no light. Those two high bars, the reading and math, that 1.2 amounts to about a year of school. So kids come in a year behind, low-income children come in a year behind high-income children when they're entering into school, right? Those first 5 years, those differences in what they're experiencing those first 5 years are leading to those differences in reading and math skills, okay? The other thing that I like to point out is that people can get real caught up, and I understand this, in children's behavior problems. Because when you have a misbehaving child in a classroom or in any environment, right, could be the grocery store, that you cannot escape that. That is front and center, and you see that, and it's disruptive. It's very hard to see that a kid isn't really good at math when you're just hanging out with them on a regular basis, right? So the behavior problems between low-income and higher-income children are much, much smaller than the differences in their academic preparation, okay? For two reasons. One, I'll just put it out there, low-income children are far better behaved than many of the stereotypes you might have. And two, affluent children are much worse behaved than many of the stereotypes you have. And early childhood behavior fluctuates quite a bit, right? Kids are good and bad depending on the month, depending on what's going on with them and their situations. Now, those early skill gaps, this is the difference. The bottom is low-income children. The top line is high-income children, and those are your middle-class children in between. In the U.S., we have a schooling system, a K-12 system, that maintains inequality. It doesn't shrink those gaps as kids move through school. So they come into school about a year apart. This is for reading and math. And they stay at least a year apart. Now, I am not a K-12 scholar or academic researcher on K-12. My colleagues who are spend a lot of time debating whether this is good or bad. Is the glass half empty? It's not getting a lot worse over time, but it's also not getting better. So again, those differences in school persist over time. Differences in behavior also persist over time. I haven't changed the scale. This is to show you that differences in behavior by income also stay small and stay the same over time, but again, much smaller. Now, this is particularly important in the context, I think, of our state. It's different when I talk to different populations. We know that the differences in children's achievement by income status has been going up over time, meaning that things are getting worse. Higher income children are coming more and more prepared. Low income children are coming no more prepared over time, right? And so we know this from national data. The gap started at about 0.7, and then now it's hitting that about 1.2, that year of schooling. Interestingly, on the national level, race trends are not tracking that, okay? So differences between black-white test scores have been going down over time, meaning that they're getting better. The difference between white and black children has been getting better on a national level. That hasn't been going as well for our particular state. I think we're all aware of that. On the other hand, I say this to point out that while in our state, race and income are highly confounded, meaning that low-income children are disproportionately brown and black, as I showed you in the prior graph, it is not the same construct, okay? So what is driving all of the race gap can be very different from what is driving the income gaps, okay? And obviously many children contend with both of those sets of factors, but I have to be 100% clear they are different factors often, okay? The other thing we know, I just want to point this out because it breaks my heart every time I do it, is just how sticky these achievement differences are. So when you look at cohorts of kids who are going on to college, it used to be, so this is a cohort that went to college in the early 80s, 5% of low-income children graduated for a four-year degree. 5%. Now, 36 of higher-income children did, right? Fast forward 20 years or thereabouts, it's doubled or nearly doubled for low-income children, but 10% are getting a four-year college degree. Think about that, because think about what you need to earn a living wage in our country and in our communities. It's those higher education skills and degrees, right? So 5% to 9% is progress, but it's still falling terribly short of where we need to get our workforce to be if we want to have economic growth, and where we want our citizens to be in terms of their ability to be economically self-sufficient. So there's a great, I'm very jealous of this, Raj Chetty has a wonderful analysis of income in the US and income over generations. His analysis is better than anyone else because he was able to get access to super secret top tax data, and none of the rest of the researchers in the country could get access to it. He had good friends in the right place. So what you'll see is that, and this is super interesting, the chance that you are if you're born into a low-income family, the chance that you will become wealthy yourself is on this graph. And what it shows you is that if you are born into a low-income family and you live in that swath west of us, those lighter colors, you have a higher chance of getting up there. And that's topping out at like 16% chance of getting there, okay? So not super high, but better. If you're in the super, super dark places, Mississippi Delta, oh wait, and look, Milwaukee County, your chance is less than 4%, okay? So it shows both that there is variability. It's not a predetermined thing where someone who is born into a low-income community to a low-income family necessarily has to be poor. But it does show that some places are doing worse at building economic mobility than others. And this is just another look with a zoom in on Milwaukee, okay? Which shows, again, the chances, if you're born into a low-income family, that you're going to get up into, this is actually shades of earnings, and the dark red suggests that you're going to earn less than 10%, or $10,000, right? And the high end of that dark blue is that the chance says that on average you'll earn $60,000, right? So this even tells you that poor children in Central City, Milwaukee have less chance. These are all poor children. But if they're in the surrounding suburbs, if they're in a different context, they have better chances. Now, it's not causal. It's not to say that there's anything necessarily in the water or in the schools. But I think as we all know that there's a convergence of factors that shape children's experiences, right? And every one of you in the room could probably name 5 things off the top of your head. Lead, quality child care, quality health care, access to mental health services, and other community resources that differ between the communities that are in brown and maybe those that are showing up as blue. And you can all have your own favorite list. I won't tell you what should be on that list. Okay, so what do we really think? I'm going to flip a little bit. I'm sure Dr. Suskind talked about this as well. What do we really think is going on with poverty and children who experience early childhood poverty that's driving these differences in outcome? Many people have thought about this, and I think for ease of digestibility. Most of us have landed on putting it in two buckets of things. One is the fact that when you have money, when you have resources, and when you live in a resourced community, you can purchase things and provide experiences for children that are good for them, right? So you can have a home that is lead-free, you can have easy access and walk to parks, you can go to local libraries that have lots of opportunities, you can buy higher quality childcare because it's available around the corner and not oversubscribed, and you can send them to good public schools, for example, right? All of those things, healthcare, transportation to get to things, those things require money, and only some of our public benefits and community services cover those costs, right? So having money actually does provide parents an ability to spend their money in ways that benefit their children. Lots of times people say to me, well, it's not just money. You know, if you give poor people more money, what are they going to do with it? Well, we actually know the answer to this. Do you know what they do with it? The same thing that middle class or upper class parents do with it. They spend it on basic needs, and then they spend it on family needs and enrichments, right? So the patterns of expenditure across low-income and high-income families, with some exception for how much rent costs, or how much more rent and childcare costs for low-income families, they spend it in the same sets of ways. So overall expenditures on all the things that middle-class parents spend it on go up. The other bucket that we think a lot about is stress and cognitive load. So many of you who have worked with or spent time with low-income families are well aware of how much time, energy, and mental capacity it takes to live on a limited budget. It is a tremendously taxing and stressful experience. And we also know that on low-income wages and with low-income jobs, there's a tremendous amount more now of income volatility and economic shocks, right? So many people are not just living on low income, but their shifts change regularly, their paycheck changes, and if your car breaks down, or if you need to pay a medical bill, or if one of your family members needs money for something, a flat tire, you can come up with 100 different reasons. It is very hard to make those ends meet. And so it does two things. It reduces mental health, right? So we know that clinical depression is extremely high among low-income women. I think the numbers suggest that postpartum, it's 20 to 30%, right, of low-income women experience postpartum depression. And it also requires a tremendous amount of cognitive skill. So the best example of this is to go to the grocery store and say you need to make a week's worth of meals, and bring your children, because they're going to ask for all sorts of licorice and candy bars at checkout, right? Tell one family, and then tell yourself that you have $50, and that's all you have. What would you do? You would have hopefully your phone or a calculator or something, but you would look at the price of everything you were buying, and you would add it up. And then you wouldn't just look at the price of what you were buying, you can compare it to what you were not buying, knowing that you might have a preference for one brand versus the other anyway, because one of them, they don't all taste the same, right? So that is a very different shopping experience than probably most middle-class families experience. Not that they don't pay attention to price. Everyone, or many middle-class families pay a lot of attention to price, but the cost of going $2 over, or the cost of getting it, or the time cost that it will take them is much, much less. And that is one task, one basic task. Now think about how you're going to pick which bills to pay, how you're going to pick whether you get a bus or a car, how you're going to pay for incidentals for school, all of the above, right? Diapers, it is a tremendously tiring task to be low income. And what do we often ask low income people to do? When we're giving them services and benefits, we create even more layers of complicated applications to get benefits and services, appointments that they have to make it to without any real accommodations for what their schedule looks like. And then we complain that they're really many people might complain that they're not being planful enough. And if they really just cared about making their life better, they would get through all of these hoops. And I think it really speaks to misunderstanding the way in which poverty creates both cognitive load and stress for families. Unfortunately, those experiences, or fortunately, in early childhood that the parents are having matter for those children. So this is the Center for the Developing Child taglines, and I think probably Dr. Suskind talked quite a bit about this, so I'll go over it quickly. There's two things that we know that young children need. They need enrichment from loving, caring, supportive adults, whether that be in daycare or in their family, and really they need it in both, whatever care environment they're in. And that's both the responsiveness and the warmth and the language stimulation and the interaction, okay? It's incredibly important. And one of my favorite things to tell people to do, there are videos online that simulate what children experience or what children react with when their parents are not being responsive. Google them. They're really interesting and really sort of heartbreaking to see kids kind of freak out when they're used to having lots of great warmth and stimulation, and then their parents sort of withdraw from them. The other thing that we know is that 50 years ago, the science wasn't really clear on whether children experience stress. We didn't have good measures. Our physiology and our understanding of the biology of stress has really advanced. And now we know that even though children as young as 12 years or 12 months old can't tell you they're stressed, that their bodies are feeling it, and that the stress response systems affect brain development. I'm sure Dr. Suskind talked about that. So we know that when children are stressed, it can compromise healthy brain architecture. So what does that mean? Violence in communities, violence in the home, even if it's not directed at the child, and severe neglect have really critical negative impacts on children's development beyond what you might see sort of on the surface, right? So it's being embedded in their brain architecture. So here's the exciting point, now that I've made you depressed, is to think about what can be done differently, right? We have the science. I heard Dr. Suskind say it. The science of development is clear, okay? We know what children need. It's not a mystery. What we need to figure out is how we can put together our human services and policies in a way that works in the service of children and families, right? In a way that says these are not disconnected silos that run a program here and a program here, but in a way that centers children, centers families, and helps them achieve economic mobility by building healthy early development. And I'm going to talk about three things that we know work. And I'm going to be quick because I'm not just supposed to lecture. Okay, so the first thing that we know that works, and Milwaukee is doing a good job of this, is early childhood education. Okay? So this is an analysis that I did with some colleagues at the Forum for Policies and Programs. This is a graph that shows the estimated impact for every evaluation study that's been done of a preschool program over time through 2007, because that's when we started the project. And what I want you to see here is 0. The baseline is 0. Almost all the impacts are above 0. That means that they're having a positive effect on children's cognitive outcomes. So it's achievement-like outcomes, language, some IQ stuff is mixed in there. It works. That's great. The other thing I will say to you, and I think this is just as an important point to take away, not every program is having the same impact, and they're not all large. Okay? There is variability in the quality of early childhood that children experience. We know that the field is facing large workforce issues. They're facing other issues as well. And so it's important not just to do it, not just to invest in it, but to think critically about how to build a system that has continuous learning and supports programs at delivering the best quality that they possibly can. There's two other things that I want to touch on that we know are important. One is quality home visiting services. And the next thing I always say is that home visiting services are not a program, it's a mode of service delivery. Okay? So there are two things called home visiting that do very different types of things. Some of them will do screening, referral, and checkup on health, immunization, super important. Others will try to build parents' confidence and teach them about child development. Also may be important, okay? So we need to think about not what is the mode of service delivery, but what is the content and the services that families get within those programs. And we know, just as it is for early childhood, not all home visiting programs are equally effective. We know those that are most effective tend to have a couple of features. One, they are long-term, and they're particularly long-term for vulnerable families. Two, they work not just on providing referrals, but on actually ensuring that the connection to services are made. And I can tell you that one of the problems many communities face is that they make referrals, but the services are not readily available, right? So it's great to refer someone for mental health counseling, but you need to have a provider who will be able to take them and see them within a reasonable window of time, right? The other thing I will say is not all families' needs are the same. And the needs of the families really do need to be matched to the skills of the home visitors. So working with a family that is very low education, where the mother herself might have some developmental disabilities, requires a different skill set than working with, or different training, than working with a mother who's maybe facing domestic violence and trauma in her own childhood. Both families may be challenged and need supports, but the type of supports that they need and the skills that you might be trained about could look very different. And it is hard to think about program models, I will say this, that are able to train everyone, one worker to meet every family's needs. And so we need to think about how we create programs that are able to meet families where they are and then connect them to the services that they need, rather than the services we just know how, and I say we as a collective because I like to feel like I'm in it with you guys, but rather than the services we know how to provide, because those are two different things sometimes. And the last thing that I'll comment on, I spent a lot of time setting up poverty, and I think it's really critical to not only think of parents as care providers, but to think of them as workers, and to think of them as drivers of economics within their own family. Families that are very low income do better when they have more economic resources, whether that's in the form of in-kind support, so food stamps, Medicaid, EITC, or whether that's in the form of earnings, higher paying jobs with steady hours. The story that I set up about how hard it is to make ends meet and how much cognitive resources and mental stress happens when you're low income is alleviated if you have more resources, right? It means that making a mistake in the grocery store or having to not get the discount for the bus pass doesn't break the rest of the month. So having more resources is a really important way to invest in young children because it affects how their parents are able to care for their children. And I'll stop there. Those are conclusions, but no one needs to make conclusions. Thank you.
We will take questions from, maybe not everyone, but some of you in just a couple minutes. I get to go first. Trauma is a word that's being heard increasingly around here, I suppose nationally as well. I mean, Oprah Winfrey says Milwaukee has trauma problems, so it must be true. This university has been very invested in that subject, especially the president and his wife has started a trauma organization, trauma conferences. Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's been. What does that term mean to you as far as helping low-income kids?
Yeah, so I think it's important to think about the type of experiences that children might have when they're entering into our public spaces, whether it's a preschool program, a public school, or a community center. And I think we generally don't ask people when they're entering at a door, are you traumatized? Have you experienced trauma? Have you seen someone get shot in your community? Have you gone days without food at home? Have you seen your mother unable to get out of bed for days? To me, what trauma means is having experienced something that, as humans, we're wired to worry about our survival, right? We're wired to want to live and be healthy. And many experiences that unfortunately are not uncommon really threaten that and elevate our stress response system in ways that ends up where we in nature having that elevated response is very useful. It's the fight or flight. I'm going to get out of here. I'll be okay. In our modern world, what often happens for children when they experience trauma is that stress response system becomes elevated and it doesn't go down, right? So what typically brings it down is that buffering relationship with someone who can swoop in and care for them, right? So I sometimes think back to Hurricane Katrina, a very traumatic experience for many, many children. The difference between a child that will go on to be traumatized by it and one that won't is probably the ability of their parent to comfort them and care for them through that crisis, because that comfort and that care can reduce the stress response system. But when it stays elevated, it changes the way that you react to the world. You feel constantly under threat, right? So things that children, a child who hasn't experienced that, sees someone, and there are these great studies where they'll show an ambiguous face, right? And let me tell you, many teachers have ambiguous faces most of the day. They show an ambiguous face. A kid who hasn't experienced trauma will be like, oh, I don't know what she's thinking. A kid who's experienced threat, an elevated threat, thinks, oh my God, she's angry at me, I'm about to get in trouble, and reacts differently to that situation, reacts in a defensive, sometimes angry way. They might withdraw. There's different ways of reacting. So it literally, when you've had a very traumatic experience, it literally changes the way you interact with people and the world. And if you know that as a provider, as a teacher, as a social worker, as whoever you are that's interacting with people, it works in offices too, I might add. It changes the way you think about someone's reaction to you, because you realize they're not just angry, they've had an experience that's cued them to be angry, and oh wait, maybe I didn't give them enough warning and smile when I provided directions, right? So there are some behavioral changes that can be made that will ease their experience, after the fact. I heard an expert talk about trauma-informed schooling. My first reaction, I was like, wow, that's really interesting, and wow, that just sounds like good schooling, right? Like transitions, being aware of what children are experiencing, providing transitions, being warm, a variety of behaviors that I would have hoped were sort of standard practice in most settings anyway. But go ahead.
Well, as a public policy matter, a lot of this is what goes on inside the walls of a home.
Right.
As a public policy matter or as a philanthropic matter, and you've got people here involved in both of those realms, tell them what they should be doing. Okay. We've just anointed an all-powerful leader of Milwaukee.
Wonderful. I think one of the important things to think about is how hard we make it for people to receive the services they need, right? So it is difficult to sign up for public benefits. We don't make it as easy as it needs to be. And we require people to go through a lot of, if you will, hoops, right? On top of it, I think that the generosity of those benefits matter. I think that helps quite a bit. So I think expanding supports, economic supports, and other supports is critically important. And then I think that continuing to recognize that people that are working from the philanthropy side and from the policy side, continuing to think about how to innovate and support people that are working on the front line, right? So we all care deeply about accountability. We want our programs to be working. I think it is time for us to think differently about the programs that we're doing in a more integrated, two-generation sort of way, and to give support to people that are on the front lines by giving them, and this is very much a Jack Shonkoff idea, giving them a little space to get it wrong, right? To innovate, to learn from what they're doing, and make changes. I think very often We have several boxes of things that we think work, and we want people to do more of what are in those boxes, and then we just layer on accountability for doing those things. And that's not going to get us to where we need to be, right? Those are going to give us the same outcomes we've been getting for the last 30 years, right? So Jack Shonkoff talks a lot about innovation and really being willing to invest in programs that are willing to try something different, not because it's a sure bet, but because we'll learn from it whether it maintains status quo and doesn't do anything better, or whether it is the best thing since sliced bread, right? I doubt that there's a silver bullet out there. There's not one thing that this community can do that will make it all okay. But there are many things that can be tried that might work. And I think following the principles of centering with the child and the family, thinking equally about supporting parents as caregivers, as well as providing experiences for children, and thinking about how to build in continuous learning is really the clearest way forward. By which I mean, okay, let me just give you a really concrete policy thing, because you're like, that's not really policy. Our state, most of the programs that our state funds are existing state programs, right? So they'll expand home visiting dollars, or they'll expand child care subsidy dollars, but they aren't necessarily trying new things. Imagine if they set aside $500,000 or $1 million for innovation, and people could apply to innovation grants to do different things. And then they'd have to, learn from it as well. There are states that do things like that. Silence.
Are there other examples that come to your mind of something being done elsewhere that we really ought to be doing in Wisconsin or in Milwaukee?
Well, I think in general, and this is, the politics of our state are what they are. I think in general
I'm totally unfamiliar with this.
Investment, right? Just recognition that investment actually is useful, right? That spending money on programs for children and families will have measurable benefits. So we could be spending more in those ways. Other things that communities are doing, or things to keep on your radar. I heard someone asked a question about incarceration. I think there's a lot of work to be done around justice reform, incarceration, reintegration for people who are coming out. There's a lot to be done around father involvement, the importance of men in families and communities. Often home visiting services, as just an example, and I don't know this is not a comment on those in Milwaukee, but nationally, I'll say, many home visiting services are really focusing on mothers to the absence of fathers, right? So those are two areas where there's something to be done. I think there's a lot of thinking about systems building and integration, right? So if you are a poor person in New Orleans, a poor mother, and you want to send your child to a quality early childhood learning environment, there is an app. And you fill in your information, and it tells you what Head Start program, what child care program, or 4K program would be available to you. Has anyone tried to do this in Milwaukee? How many calls would you have to make to different programs? And how many different visits would you have to make? Many is the short answer, right? So even though, and that service integration does two things, right? It vastly reduces the administrative burden, that time and that effort that it takes. And it says that, like, as a Head Start program, I'm going to, it works together so that the systems are talking to each other. They know where the openings are, and they understand that they're all working towards the same goal. I'm not saying that never happens in Milwaukee. I'm just saying it's not a very integrated system in our state about how these things work together.
Last question from me. On the chart you had on the early childhood programs, Head Start was on there. Mm-hmm. They were generally above zero.
They are.
But
yes.
They weren't stellar.
Right.
I'm now appointing you all-powerful head of Head Start nationwide. What would we do to get better impact from Head Start? Frankly, I've been to Head Start centers that I thought were pretty good. I've been to Head Start centers where I didn't think much was going on.
And I think, right, so the thing to keep in mind is that's national data. right? So that's looking across all Head Start programs in the U.S. And I think that's essentially correct. Some of them do wonderful things. Some of them are challenged in their programming. And this is a much longer conversation than what would I do. It's because there's a variety. There's a lot that they have done, and then there's more that they could do. And a lot of what Head Start faces is really challenging in terms of being able to enroll kids and get sustained participation as well. So you have migrant Head Start programs. So I would simply say that I think it's important to recognize what they are able to do and to think about, again, in the same context that you should think about in other programs, home visiting programs, economic support programs, what are the opportunities for innovation? And less about what is the opportunity for regulation. Does that make sense? So I think often when we're thinking about, oh, there's variability in programs, I know what I'll do. I'll make sure that every program has a BA teacher, a teacher with a college degree, right? Because that's easy to measure. That's supposed to matter, right? But it often that's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? That's a very blunt tool that won't always work, right? And so the question isn't like, what accountability measure can I add on that will make them better? It's thinking about, sort of in my mind, really thinking more about innovation and what do programs need to do better, rather than what can I tell them they should be doing to do better.
From the standpoint of programs, Head Start and others, and getting, this will come up when Tracy Sparrow's up here in a little bit, because of the EduCare project that they had at the Next Door Foundation, but to get staff that has that kind of level of educational attainment and such, and then put them in jobs that the average salaries
$11 an hour.
I was going to say 12. I'm a big spender.
Yeah, maybe here in Milwaukee, you
yeah.
give them an extra buck.
How do you get people to go into the?
You don't. We have a workforce shortage. I cannot spend more than 2 hours in a room full of young children. Like, it takes a very special skill set and a real commitment and love on top of it. We have to pay people more. And so programs that have more money are able to get high quality staff and support them. And those that aren't have a revolving door of marginally skilled people that they keep trying to get up to speed. So it's not that the program directors aren't trying, but it's that you can, in Madison, you get $15 working at Whole Foods, and you're not in a room with 4-year-olds, which maybe that's people's preference. You get more money walking dogs on WAG than you do working in a preschool. So I don't think there is, I'd like to tell you here's what you can do to get people into the field and pay them no money and have them be really skilled and stay. But your basic Econ 101 says that's not a sustainable system. It doesn't work.
Questions? Hold on a second, and Eric will give you a microphone.
Thank you. I would like to go back to the trauma-informed care part of the discussion. And I just wanted to say that when we say trauma-informed care, it's such a big buzzword now in 2019. And we look at the trauma-informed care in our work as, oh, the child, the poor family needs to have this. But really, in the work that I've done, I believe that we have to look inward. We have to look at ourselves and apply the trauma-informed information to ourselves so that we can work better with the families that we're dealing with. And a lot of times we, as the professional or as the person handling the situation, don't feel like there's anything wrong with us. And that's something that I think really, if it's truly to be trauma-informed care, we need to know inside ourselves, our biases, our stereotypes, our everything needs to be checked so that we can have a really intelligent and fruitful interaction with that family. If the family feels that well, you're just looking at me as a poor person because you think that you're all that and you're trying to do this for me, you're not going to get any results. And unfortunately, a lot of times we, the professional, needs to look at our trauma-informed situation. We need to take the ACE study. We need to look and see where we really measure out because a lot of times we don't feel there's nothing wrong with us. It's just the family. So.
Yeah, I'll just, in social work, we have a term that I think is really useful, and it's humility, right? Whether it's trauma-informed humility, culturally informed humility, it's the recognition that we're not expert on ourselves and we're not experts on others, and we're constantly asking questions of ourselves and of others to seek a deeper understanding. And I think that's very consonant with what you're saying.
From a community organizing.
Keep pushing down on it, I think.
Yeah, from a community organizing point of view, the solutions are in the community, and it is the people that are impacted that need to be empowered. Mm-hmm. So the parents and whoever is in the home and the caregivers in the home are most important. There's a pilot project from years ago that I remember that really impressed me because they were going into the homes. Many of the parents that most need to be reached aren't going to come out to mm-hmm. a program, and maybe not to an agency even, but for their children. But they went into the homes and they brought resources because parents can't afford to buy the books and the toys and some of the things that might be helpful. They didn't just drop them off. They sat with the parents and they interacted with the kids using some of the techniques, those 3 T's that we heard about earlier. And then those parents were empowered and hired to take the program into other homes. And that seemed like a model that might really work. But is anything like that happening to not only bring resources into the homes, but empower parents for potential education and helping other parents?
I think that's the goal of a lot of home visiting programs, right? So good home visiting programs think not just about bringing books, but modeling the activities, and then also planning, life planning, problem solving with parents. I think what we know is for those that are right on the cusp of being able to sort of take off and blossom, that works wonderfully well, and others need a lot more support because there's a lot more roadblocks to being able to do that. Head Start certainly has invested in that model for a long time. They were a community action program, and empowerment was in the very origin of that program. So I think a lot of service providers, a lot of 2-generation programs have very much that model of empowering and getting, and ultimately, again, if you center on children and families, you don't want those families to stay where they are. You want them to succeed and move on to their own economic well-being. And so I think that's the hope for a lot of programs, and they try and come at it in different ways.
Let's go way back. Yeah, hold on. Eric will be right there.
Kind of building off of what you had just mentioned, I wondered if you had looked at how the UW Extension for years had home visiting programs, and then county human services departments ran separate parallel programs. And that came to mind when Dr. Suskind was speaking too about building a system of delivery, and I'm thinking we already have some of it. Yep. And although you want to concentrate on creative innovation ideas, how could we change what already we have into place to do some of the things that you mentioned, like ease the burden of application for the families we visit, expand to include fathers instead of just looking at the maternal side of nutrition and baby development? What more could we do for an existing system that already exists?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question because home visiting exists and it's been expanded actually in recent years. It's one of the investments that's been increasing. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is that, again, it's a mode of service delivery and the programs do different things. And so I think the answer really depends on the program that you're talking about, right? So there's a distinction between the nurse home visiting program, which is much more intensive, and then parents as teachers, which has a different content and less intensive. So I think there's a lot to be learned across programs. I think it also depends on what communities you're in, what age the children are, whether you're in an early Head Start versus a Get Ready for Pre-Kindergarten program. Those are different things. So yes, there is a service delivery system in place that's even been expanded in terms of programming. And I think so for that reason, I go back to sort of innovation and continuous quality improvement. What resources are there to learn about what's working within a community? And what do we know about how it's working? And I'll put a little plug in for anyone who cares about the academic sides of things. Data.
What?
Data.
Oh.
So if you wanted to know whether kids that were in a community who had a home visiting service were doing better when they entered school compared to kids who didn't, how would you know? As a state, we do a lot of good data stuff, but we still have some real limitations from what we can use in terms of administrative data and local community data. So I think I would love, now I'm talking to the department administrators, I would love our department administrators to push forward on integrating their administrative data and on thinking about how they could support communities who want to do a real needs assessment around families and children as opposed to a fake one. So I think a lot of times when communities, when they're right, like, I mean, you're all in the space where you have to write grants to get money to do things, whether you're a state policy person or a local program operator. And there's going to be, like in the Head Start, you've got to do this community assessment, and you just look on the internet for data that you can find, right? And a lot of it's program operation data, which doesn't really tell you how anything is happening at the community level or at a population level, right? And so it's not that it's fake data, it's that it's incomplete and isn't actually giving us the information we need to know what a community needs. Sorry, so that's but I think there's a lot of opportunities that some creative thinking, some investment around state data, around county data could really push forward our understanding of how our programs are operating and what more could be done, right? So we might find out that one community, the health of these kids is off the charts. They're doing much better in terms of health. We've nailed the low birth weight thing because we've gotten to mothers, when they're pregnant. That's another thing. We need to get to women while they're pregnant, not waiting until the child is born. If I hadn't said that, that's important. But maybe their academic skills or their behavior is not doing well, right? But I don't think there's anyone in this room that could tell me whether that's true about their community or not, because the data are not available in that way. I'd like to be wrong. I could be wrong.
Okay, we'll give Tracy.
You talked about economics.
It's got to be short here.
Thank you. And I think you're doing some research about giving cash to families, and I wonder if you could just talk about that for a minute.
Yes, I'll say that for 1 minute. So I have an experimental study, a randomized controlled trial in 4 communities, none of them in Wisconsin. So in 4 communities in which we are recruiting low-income, poor mothers, quite poor. Average income is $16,000 a year for their households, and giving them $4,000 a year of unconstrained cash on a debit card. And then we're following them and their children for at least 3 years, and hopefully longer. And we're collecting a lot of information about family life, about employment, childcare, all that economic stuff, family relationships, parenting. We're videotaping mother-child interactions, so we'll get a sense of how warm and responsive those mothers are interacting with their children. And we're getting measures of brain connectivity through EEGs, as well as physiological stress measures from cortisol and a bunch of other things. So it's very much a biomedical and social science take on trying to understand the extent to which additional cash supports at a time when families are very vulnerable. I didn't say this either, but I think we know that around the time of a birth, right, that is one of the most economically vulnerable times for families, because it's very hard to work full-time with a quite young infant, even if you're past that 6-week mark. It's the highest cost of childcare. It's the least sleep you'll ever get. It's all of that. And we know that families really struggle during that time period, and it's often when many couples' relationships disintegrate as well. So we're testing the idea that additional cash support at this critical juncture in a family's life will have a positive impact on their family life and their child's development.
So tell me something hopeful. I mean, seriously, is there hope?
I think there's always hope, right? So, you know, the system that we have exists because we've created it, right? And so that means that there's the opportunities for change and for rethinking the way that we operate. And I see the number of people in this room as a really positive sign that people are interested, that we finally come to a point where people are interested in thinking differently about how to center and support children and families in this really great community.
Let's
and
stop.
I think, and I'll also say,
I was going to say let's stop, but we aren't.
One more thing. And there are glimmers of hope, right? So there are, you know, proposals from people that are unexpected that will push forward, not in our state but nationally, child tax credits, right? That want to double the size of the child tax credit and make it, and make it refundable, right? So and that's coming from Mike Lee of Utah, who's not your average liberal Democrat, right? So, you know, our political system is what it is, but there are always opportunities to think differently and find some leverage points. And I think early childhood appeals across the political spectrum in a way that simply poverty uncoupled with early childhood often does not, for better or worse.
There are other questions, but we're going to stop here, unfortunately. I don't know if you're available to talk with people. We're going to take a 20-minute break or an 18-minute break. 10:50, we will be back. We have some excellent people for a panel. Thank you to Dr. Magnuson for sharing your... In my own, maybe not sufficiently humble opinion, I thought we've had two really good sessions here so far, and I'm deeply appreciative to Dr. Suskind and Professor Magnuson for coming in, both of them a little bit against the grain. Among other things, Professor Magnuson had to stay at home in Madison to get her kids off to school. I said, it'd be a little weird to have a family-oriented event where we weren't helping you with your family. So my great gratitude to them. But we have a couple more, I believe, really good things to do here this morning. I think every household, but for sure every law school, should have a really good researcher and number cruncher. And we have one here. Our research associate is John Johnson. And we asked him to put together some maps and things on the availability of child care programs in Milwaukee particularly. And so he's going to do a few minutes on that. And I want to welcome John.
Thank you, Alan, and thanks for coming today. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to describe the geography of state-licensed daycare centers in Milwaukee County. We don't have any good numbers on exactly how many caretakers of small children in Milwaukee seek child care services in either the formal or informal economy. But according to an IFF study recently commissioned by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, there are just 34,000 child care spots designated for kids under 5 in Milwaukee County, and there are 70,000 kids under 5 who live in the county. IFF estimates that 50% of Milwaukee children live in places with low access to early childhood education. So at the end of my presentation, I'll demo an interactive map I made to let you more easily explore the state's data for yourself. Both of these maps you see right now are images from that. Each dot on the leftmost map is one of the 1,070 daycares in the county, and the right map is a heat map of where children under 4 live in the county. So as you'll notice, children are not evenly distributed across Milwaukee. For one thing, children are more likely to live in the city of Milwaukee itself. 61% of the county's adult residents live in the city, but 68% of children under 6 live here, so 7% more than the adult population. Just 158 out of 1,070 daycares in the county are in the suburbs. Even though 32% of young children live in the suburbs, those communities host just 21% of all daycare seats. I think this probably reflects the way parents often seek daycares closer to their place of work. There may also be less demand for state-licensed daycares in the suburbs. Perhaps they're more likely to use nannies or other alternatives. Those daycares which are located in the suburbs tend to be more highly ranked. So daycares are ranked by the state of Wisconsin from 1 star to 5 stars using the Department of Children and Families Young Star method. I'm sure some of you here are experts in that. I'm just going to read what it says on the website, which is that the star levels are research-based indicators linked to quality and include leadership educational qualifications, learning environment and curriculum, business and professional practices, including staff benefits and family involvement, as well as child health and well-being. So 87% of 2-star daycare seats and 88% of 3-star daycare capacity are in the city of Milwaukee, but only 55% of 5-star daycare seats are. To put that another way, the suburbs hold just 21% of daycare seats, but they have 45% of the highest quality seats. The business models of daycares also vary between the city and suburbs. The smallest state-licensed daycares have a maximum capacity of just 8 students. And these are really common in the city of Milwaukee, where they make up 50% of all childcare. In the suburbs, they only account for 23% of the total. So if you miss that, half of the daycare locations in the city of Milwaukee are this very small kind that serves just a maximum of 8 children. Those per daycare statistics can be deceptive, though. So even though 46% of daycare facilities in the county are capped at 8 children, they only make up 8% of all available daycare capacity because they're just so small. Similarly, only 10% of childcare capacity is provided by the largest daycares, those able to serve 200 or more students. The majority of Milwaukee's childcare capacity is among daycares serving either 50 to 100 children or 150 to 200 children. Those are the most common sizes. There are only small differences in average rating by daycare size. Those daycares, the 8-person ones, the smallest ones, are the lowest rated on average at 3.05 out of 5 stars. But daycares serving 150 to 200 children do scarcely better at 3.08. The daycares that serve 100 to 149 students have the highest average at 3.83. It is true that larger daycares are somewhat more likely to achieve the highest 5-star rating than their smaller counterparts, but there are highly and poorly rated facilities among all size ranges. We can take a closer look at these variations using the interactive map I already mentioned. You can access it by visiting lubarcenter.shinyapps.io/Milwaukee County Childcare, but I don't expect you to remember that. We'll post it online, and it'll be in the email you'll all receive after today's program. So, by default, the map shows all 1,070 daycares in the county. If you click on a dot, we'll look at Marquette's. If you click on a dot, you can see the name of the child care center, its address, capacity, its rating, the precise age that at which it begins care, and the ending age, as well as its hours of operation. You can also filter by the Young Star rating using these buttons here. You can just toggle on and off the levels you are interested in. And you can also filter by the capacity of daycares. So, for instance, these are all of those 8-person child care centers in the city. You'll notice there are a lot of them, and they're almost all within the city of Milwaukee's limits. You might be more interested in seeing the map of just larger daycares, which you can see like this. You can also filter by the earliest age that they accept children. So these are all of the daycares that accept newborn infants in the city. You can see there's only one 5-star rated facility that does that, and it only has a capacity of 8 students. You can also filter by the oldest age. For instance, these are all the daycares that only accept children under 6. And you can add a base map layer. So the one I showed you earlier was total children under 4 years of age. It's that map. I've also provided heat maps of, so the way the census defines it is families who have children under 4 who also have an Asian householder or a black householder, a Latino householder, or a white householder. So for instance, this is the heat map of where Latino families live in Milwaukee. And you can layer the daycares on top of that and zoom in to see the kinds of care that is provided. So for example, looking at this section of the city, this is the Walker's Point, Walker Square area. This large blue dot is the United Community Center daycare. I'm sure most of us are familiar with them. Nearby are 2 2-star rated, I believe, MPS daycares. And then you see that there are these 3 very small daycares, 1 rated 2 stars, 1 3, and 1 5. Overall, the south side of Milwaukee, apart from the pervasive problem of a general lack of capacity, is pretty well served by a range of high-quality daycares. This is different in other parts of the city. So I'm going to flip the base map to where black families are located, and I'm going to filter the star ratings for 1, 2, and 5. There are a lot of young children in the near West Side neighborhood near us right now, so like in the Concordia and Avenues West neighborhoods. And you can see that in this area there are 3 5-star daycares. They're Kidtastic Childcare, Neighborhood House, and Penfield. I think all those are pretty well known. But then north of there, in the section of the city around North and Lisbon and the near north side, this entire circle of pretty highly populated neighborhoods, there are 0 5-star daycares at all. There's just a real hole in that section of the city. There are lots of childcare facilities, they're just more lowly rated. So if you zoom out, you can see a pretty noticeable pattern of where the 5-star daycares are and where the lower rated ones are as well. My hope is that this map will help people explore and answer their own questions about the specific kinds of childcare resources in the neighborhoods that interest them. And if you have any questions about how to use it or a way you think it could be improved, please feel free to reach out to me here at the law school by phone or email. Thank you.
Just to repeat what John said, and even as he was starting to speak, I got a text message from someone in the audience, we'll call him Chris, who said, can we get this data? Yes, we're eager for everyone to be able to have access to what he's done, and it'll be in the email that you'll be getting following up on this. It'll be on the law school website, or if you have trouble getting it, send me an email and I'll be sure to direct you to someone who can help you, namely John Johnson, most likely. So thank you, John. We've had a little bit of transition in our panel discussion today. We originally had 5 people, and we went down to 4, and then just even as the program was going on here, we went down to 3 because Synovia Moss, who's listed on your program, had to leave. Something came up. I actually want to say something about what she's doing, or what she has been doing. She just told me she's leaving her job at the Med College, but still continuing to work on this project called VROOM, VROOM, which is funded by, I believe, I'm correct, the Bezos Family Foundation, the Amazon guy, but his family's foundation, not his own. Don't ask me how this works out with his divorce. That's another story. Nonetheless, they've been funding early childhood projects across the country, and this VROOM is particularly, she says Milwaukee is their most successful site. It is a app available for free that sends out like parenting tips to anyone. It's intended to be targeted to low-income parents. The assumption is that everybody pretty much has a smartphone these days. And just like little things, some of the kind of things that Dr. Suskind was talking about, tips on talking to your kids, volley and return kind of stuff. And, talk while you're driving and so on. It's an interesting idea. Dr. Suskind was very leery of high-tech stuff and its influence in many ways. It can also be a very valuable tool potentially. So I'm sorry that she had to leave, because this whole notion of what can tech do to help in ways that are low cost and easily accessible is something that is going to evolve, I think, in the next few years, and maybe it'll work. But what we do have here are three really important and involved people with big roles in the early childhood scene in Milwaukee. I'm interested in asking each of them specific questions and general questions about early childhood services and needs in the city. So let me introduce them. I'll start with Laura Gutierrez, who is now been tapped to be the head of the United Community Center, because Ricardo Diaz, who I believe left at the break but was here, is retiring in June, April? May. Okay, somewhere in the spring. It's one of those months. Ricardo, who has been a great participant in things here at the law school and a great leader of the community, and I have every reason to be optimistic that Laura will only build on that. So she is the current associate director, I believe, and the incoming director of the United Community Center on the South Side. Tracy Sparrow is the president, is that the correct title? President of Next Door, which, among other things, is I believe, am I correct, the largest Head Start contractor in Milwaukee? About the same size as MPS, and has two really major centers, both high-quality places, one over near 27th and Center, and one at 53rd and Capitol. And Tom Schneider, who is the, what is your title, President, CEO, both? Executive Director of COA, a major youth serving and long-time youth serving agency here, and has strong early childhood programs both in their River West Center and in their what they call the Golden, the Goldin Center, a name and not a medal, at 22nd and Burleigh. Am I right about the address? Yeah, I think so. So let me invite all three of them to come up. And I'm going to ask them each to give some overall thoughts, along with one specific question for each of them. And maybe we'll have another couple of questions from me, and then questions from you. Let me say one thing. We'll wrap up a few minutes after noon, like 12:05, I think it says on your program. There will be a lunch outside, a box lunch. You're welcome to take it and leave. You're even more welcome to take it and stay and network with people you know, people you don't know. I'll say this at the end, but let me say it now. My hope, I think the law school's hope, and we're eager to be a convener on these things, is that this is not a one-time event, that the needs are great and the need for further innovation and progress and doing better for kids is great, and we want to be involved in that. So if you have thoughts on ways to continue convening in small groups, in bigger groups, particular programs or focal points, I'm eager to hear about it, because I'm eager to do more, and I think I can speak for this whole institution. Marquette University as a whole is eager to do more as well, especially with its big involvement in trauma. So let me turn to these fine people. Let's start with Tracy. The whole scene of early childhood, and I know a big concern for you is finding workers. So general thoughts and particularly workforce thoughts.
Yeah, so workforce is probably our biggest concern at Next Door. We have right now 30 teacher positions that we need to fill. And what happens is when we can't fill them is we have classrooms we can't open. So that's a real problem for us. And someone mentioned earlier the pay for the workforce. I think the average child care teacher pay is $10.32. So we're entrusting what we think is the most important work to people who are very poorly paid, like was noted earlier, dog walkers make more money. And this is really important work. So we really are trying to do things to build the workforce, but it's kind of an uphill battle because, as you all know, in Wisconsin, teachers don't get a lot of respect. And I think that's a real problem. I know that probably many parents these days, if their child said they were going to be a teacher, would probably discourage their child from that field. And that's a real shame because that's creating many of our problems I think we have. So there are some things that are happening that I think are going to be very helpful. We are part of a partnership, including the Literacy Lab in DC. It's called the Leading Men Fellows, and it takes young men who are ages 18 to 24 who are given some training. They're young men of color, and they are in our classrooms for language and literacy development. And our hope is that these young men will choose to become teachers, and we've seen some success with that. Right now, 3 of our fellows from last year are in early childhood education. We are employing 1, and we have 2 who will be starting with us at the end of the month. So that's really exciting because nationwide, I think the statistic is about 2% of teachers are men of color, and hardly any of those are in early childhood. So that's happening. We're excited about that. A group of us early child care providers worked with Employ Milwaukee, and we're starting an apprenticeship program for early childhood, so we hope that'll have some impact as well. But it is the biggest issue.
A follow-up question about Next Door specifically. Starting 10 years ago, roughly, you had the EduCare initiative, funded primarily by the Buffett family. Peter Buffett, Warren Buffett's son, lived in Milwaukee at that time. It cost something over $20,000 per kid to do this. It was much more highly staffed, longer hours, a lot of professional development, a lot more family involvement. But there was that problem with the price tag. What was learned from EduCare, and what's the state of it now?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to be part of the EduCare network, and that's 24 best practice early childhood schools across the country. And I think what we've seen is the cost is a problem. When they started, it was a very prescriptive model, like you have to have 3 teachers in the classroom at all times, and 2 of them have to have bachelor's degrees, and it was very prescriptive. And I think the network has really evolved to saying we really need to focus on the principles that we know create quality. So the 4 that we're focusing on are high quality teaching practices, intensive family engagement, data utilization, and embedded professional development or coaching. And so that's where we really focus our efforts, on those 4 principles. And then the other parts of that are leadership and community impact, or community partnerships. So that's sort of where the network is evolving to, and they're really trying to focus on innovation and how can we do things differently that are better for kids.
Has it been a plus in a decade
Yeah,
here?
absolutely. For us, I think it's been, for Next Door specifically, it's had a great impact. So when I started, we had a little EduCare school with 168 kids, but we serve about 1,500 children. So over the past 4 years, our effort has been really to say, if the EduCare model or the EduCare principles are good for this little school, then it's good for everyone we're serving. And so we've really spread it across all our programs so that we're all doing what EduCare says is best practices for kids based on the research.
And does the money exist to do that?
It's
you talk
been a
about
challenge.
$10 and what did you say? $10.32, $10.12.
Yeah, well, we paid more than $10.
But I'm just saying, you know,
but yeah, that's the
obviously money is an issue.
Yeah, it is an issue, but I think we've tried to be very efficient, and so to make sure we're focusing our costs on the classroom, and so things like we outsourced our facilities and saved over $500,000. Like, we're trying to look at things where we can really control our costs so that we can focus on the work that's happening in the classroom, and we've been pretty successful. And the community support too. I mean, I will say we've got tremendous support from the community in Milwaukee to do our work.
The UCC is a powerhouse organization on the South Side, and frankly, I've never seen anything going on at the UCC whether it's from early childhood through senior services that wasn't first rate. And now you are expanding, Laura, into a bigger involvement in early childhood. You're building a center at 22nd and Beecher. You're, in effect, creating a continuum from birth through at least 8th grade at Bruce Guadalupe and Acosta. How are things going, and what's the value of that continuum?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Alan, and thank you for your question. You're right. The UCC has been a staple, I would say, in the city of Milwaukee for the last 50 years. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary. And truly, the mission of the organization is to provide a comprehensive, wraparound approach or programming that will help everybody who walks through our doors reach their potential. And so, as Alan stated, for many years, we tapped into going back. We were a K-4 school, K-5 through 8th grade, and decided, my goodness, we're seeing more of our parents who are needing extra care, and the families that we serve are bilingual. They are Spanish dominant. We are definitely for our students being bilingual and understanding their language, because that is an asset. And we tapped into bringing in 3-year-olds. Very costly. Great support from the community. We could not have done it without our funders because we knew it wasn't funded. But for us, if we wanted to close that achievement gap and get those kiddos in the classrooms learning and providing them to reach their potential, we knew it was a good investment. That worked. About 2 years ago, we had an opportunity to take over a child care center on 22nd and Beecher. It was no longer wanted. I believe the Spanish Center, somebody had it. I can't remember who it is. A 1950s building. There were 17 students there. They said, would you be interested? You're already educating 3-year-olds. What do you think? We looked at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation study, in which they told us that the 53215 zip code has about 5,000 children under the age of 5. So we said, well, we know the recipe from 3 to college. Maybe we should do this if there is a need in the community. So we did. We grew it to about 100 children. We then were awarded the Head Start grant. So working with Tracy has been really great for us, as we are one of the new early Head Start and Head Start grantees. And in that meantime, we decided, before we were the Head Start grantees, that there was a need in the community, in our community where we're seeing this. And we decided to invest and start from the ground up. To invest $9.5 million in creating an early learning academy that will educate and nurture approximately a little bit over 200 kiddos from 6 weeks to the age of 3. That is a big undertaking for us, but we know it is a need. We know it is important in our community, and we believe that the zip code that you are born into should not dictate what your success is. And so for us, really looking at what EduCare does, the programming that we're going to be bringing in, and the professional development, it really is critical for the staff that is going to educate our future workforce. So we are very excited about that project. We just broke ground a couple of weeks ago, and we're hoping that construction will be done and the center will be available for all in the community by fall of 2020, depending on what construction. I'm hoping for May. We'll see what the construction and what the weather looks like, but it is a great opportunity. We think it's going to transform Milwaukee. Everything that we heard today, the No Small Matter film that we have seen, just really talks about the importance of these children and the neurons that are so critical in their development, and we need to be a part of that. And so we're trying to be a part of the solution and continue to help with what are the great things that are happening in the community here in Milwaukee, and partnering with people like Tracy, Chris from Penfield, different school districts, to figure out how do we continue to fund this, because this is really a school system. I know that everything that I'm going to call her Dr. Dana or Dr. S, stated, When we think about how we've grown up and society, we believe, well, children, you know, they're cute. I mean, if I had a penny for every time somebody said to me, well, what do your teachers do all day? The kids just eat, sleep, and poop, right? And I'm like, why don't you come volunteer for a day? Well, just see what these kids, you need, it's like being at a party every day, and they're energetic. And you really need to know them to entertain them and have them engaged. They are the smartest little sponges, and we are the ones, and I would say the teachers play a critical role. Teacher has the ability to make or break a child.
So what do you do all day? What does it mean to say?
Well,
what does it mean to say an early learning academy? And the second question is, what's the role of parents? How do you work with parents?
Great question. So the Early Learning Academy was intentionally and chosen because we wanted to get away from the mentality of this is a child care center. It is a child care center. We are nurturing, but we are also providing your child a rich and stimulating environment. They are learning because from the minute they walk in, teachers are greeting them, we are talking to them, we are singing to them, the cooing. They know you. And so for the programming, when we were looking at research and what the best practices at EduCare is, children should remain with that same constant teacher from birth to 3. Why? If you all have children or nieces or even see a baby when you're shopping, they have that stranger danger. Remember when they're like 2, like, who is that person? And so for us is if a child remains with that teacher, not only is the trust and the confidence built with the child, but with the family. So we are really providing that comprehensive approach to bring the families into the center, getting to know them, getting the families to trust us to help. I'll give you a quick example. We had a parent with a child, Davian. He would not talk when he would come to our center. Mom would drop him off. You could see mom was rushed to get out. Sometimes she was upset. Sometimes she yelled at us. And we finally sat with mom and said, what is going on? How can we help? And she said, well, I don't have a job. I don't know what to do. You know, my daycare, my job's on the other side of town. We sat with her. We helped her navigate the system of, can you qualify for services? Can we get you in school? We did that. The stress lowered. Her son just developed, and it just gets me a bit emotional because that little touch allowed this child to flourish so much. The pediatrician asked her, what did you do different? And it was all, she's like, well, we have a set schedule. I have a job. They helped me find a job. She finished school. She's now working, I believe, at St. Francis Hospital. But for us, it's really understanding our families and making that connection and allowing them to take the skills that we're doing in the classroom outside. They don't need to have a 4-year degree, but they should know it's okay for you to read in Spanish. Taking those misconceptions away so that they know that any little interaction is important. Talk to them. Ask them how their day were. 5 questions, the 5 W's. And so that is what we're doing. That is what's exciting. That's what has worked for us in the community. And we're seeing success. I mean, 10 years ago, we saw our college graduation go from 8% or entrance to 90% because we know that our parents may not know how to navigate the system. And so it is our job, our responsibility to assist. How do they navigate the system, the educational system? I mean, if anybody's filled out a FAFSA form, well, I mean, online now, we used to have to do it in paper form. It's like a dissertation. Our parents who may have a language barrier may not know how to do that. So we have to come in and assist. And I think that's what's working, and that's what we're hoping to do from birth to 3 on 22nd and Beecher.
Not many people in town, on here, have had a more interesting career than Tom Schneider. As many of you know, he was a major law enforcement figure in town, the district attorney's office, deputy district attorney, was the U.S. attorney for a while, and then created a whole second career working with little kids. How How's it going? How are things going, particularly at the Golden Center? And a specific question is, COA is well known for its HIPPY program, which is a home visitation program that goes back a long time. What are the lessons from that? Home visitation is one of the areas that is, I think, of interest in these fields and might be open to expansion and innovation. So, take it away.
Yeah. I'm sitting in law school brings back some interesting memories. Imagine enjoying working with children and families more than being in the courtroom every day. There's a great joy in working with children and families. While I've only been at COA for 18 years, the agency itself has been serving Milwaukee children and families for 114 years. It was Wisconsin's first settlement house. And I think the dichotomy between the settlement house, that holistic mentality that says we can't break everything down into its own component and treat that one thing separate and apart from everything else going on in the community. We've gotten to an age of specialization, and specialization isn't always the best when the problems that we're dealing with are multifaceted. So what we do is we start with early child education, and that means quality early child education. Our 5-star early ed center at River West was one of the first 2 5-star early ed centers in the low-income areas of Milwaukee. But then more recently, opening up a quality early child education center in the heart of the 53206 zip code in the Amani neighborhood. This was a neighborhood that had every bad statistic you can imagine. People were saying, "Why are you nuts? Why are you going there?" We're going there precisely because that was where the greatest need was. And it began with youth programs, but then we built a park with the county, and then we added, worked with residents and created an early child education center and a clinic because there was no doctor's office anywhere within 30 blocks. Area had the highest infant mortality rate in the city. We opened a family resource center, which works with parents and caregivers who have young children, not separate and apart from the child, but families and children and families together. And so when I came to COA, I was particularly intrigued by our family resource center at River West, which at the time was the largest family resource center in the city. This is where parents come in with their children, birth through 5. And they play games, and they sing songs, and they do messy art projects. They can take classes, positive parenting, love and logic, whatever. But what they're really doing is building networks of support for each other. Isolation is an incredible problem in low-income communities. Who do you go to for help? What do you do? You know, families are split up, a lot of single parent caregivers, and bringing people together and creating those networks of support is an important part of quality caregiving for early child education also. And so having quality early education centers, having family resource centers, and then the other was, what about families who don't come to those things, but are isolated, alone at home, but care very much about what happens with their children? And that's where the HIPPY program came in. HIPPY was not developed by us. It stands for Home Instruction for Parents of Preschool Youngsters. It was developed many years ago in Israel, of all places, and it's now HIPPY USA. Australia has HIPPY in every school district in the country. Great Britain, Turkey, all over the world there are HIPPY programs, and there's HIPPY USA. We are an affiliate with HIPPY USA and provide that home visitation program in Milwaukee. That means every week a parent partner, most of whom started out as parents in the program with their 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, the parent partner goes to the home with the book of the week, a curriculum for every day, role plays it with the parent. That takes about an hour, hour and a half. And the parent commits to spending a minimum of 20 minutes every single day reading to that child and doing that curriculum with the child. Right? That's for 30 weeks for the 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. And then last year we were the national model for the new 2-year-old curriculum. And our biggest problem with HIPPY is we now only have 200 families, we now only have 400 families in the program. We started with 30 and it continues to grow. There's waiting lists to get in the program. Parents, and we don't advertise it, it's all word of mouth. Parents flock into the program because what do parents want most? They want the best for their child. And there are so many parents who want the best for their child, but they didn't have a role model themselves. They don't know what to do. And so while we would love to have them enroll in one of our 2 quality early ed centers, or your early ed center, or the whole network of early ed centers, and we are a partner with Next Door in our early Head Start and Head Start programs, a lot of families are on their own. And in poverty and on your own can be incredibly isolating and demoralizing. So when you've got a parent partner who's coming to your home every week and giving you the tools to be your child's first and most important teacher, you create a lifelong trajectory. We know from a Marquette evaluation that kids who were in the HIPPY program start MPS ahead of any other group entering the school system. We know from a UWM evaluation of 3rd graders that kids who were in HIPPY back when they were young, a higher percentage of them are reading at proficiency and advanced proficiency level. Why? Because they've got parents who are at home every day, engaged with their education, asking all the obnoxious questions that kids hate. What did you do in school today? Do you have any homework? Yes, I am going to the parent-teacher conferences because I'm a parent. I am your first and most important teacher. And so while creating access to quality early child education is important for us, so too is the individual attention and support that parents, often in poverty and often in isolation, really must have. Another way of breaking down that isolation is the family resource centers. And one of our former family resource center directors did a fabulous job. We were getting about 7,000 parent-child visits a year, coming in, playing games, sing songs, meeting other people, especially meeting other people, and building those networks of support. We did the same thing in the Amani neighborhood, and now it's even larger than the one at River West. We get 7,000 to 8,000 parent-child visits a year. We have family nights that attract every other month, anywhere depending on the weather, between 200 and 800 residents who begin to develop those networks of support and care about what their role is, what their responsibility is for their child, for their neighborhood, for their community. So that's the settlement house approach. And it relies on partnerships. It relies on the support that we have and the networking that we build. And our biggest challenge is not providing the HIPPY program. It's not being able to provide the HIPPY program to a long list of families who want to get into it.
So I actually thought about this a little bit. I should invite some mediocre program chiefs here or something like that. And I thought, no, the people to learn from are the people who are really doing it well. And I know all 3 of your agencies pretty well, and they're all first rate. But as John Johnson's map showed, as sizable as all 3 of your organizations are, the gap between what you're doing and the total is pretty big. So what do you do about that?
If you look at that dot map that was put up on the board before we started, it's interesting to see that big hole in the middle of the north side of Milwaukee. And so opening up, you have to open up as 2, and then you're 3, and then you're 4, and we're about to become 5. We're waiting for our NACE evaluation there. It's not by itself. It's how do you build a neighborhood, and it means having access to quality early ed. It means creating parks. It means building a neighborhood association. It means weaving together the fabric of a society. I know everybody thinks there's a single magic bullet that's going to turn something around. We're really talking about the fabric of a society, building strong families, building communities and neighbors that look out for each other.
Your thoughts, Laura?
I would say we have to look at the bigger picture and the issue with how do we look at it from a state and nation and even citywide effort. I think everybody in this room knows the importance of early childhood education, whether with our own children, nephews, nieces, but it's getting that information out to our parents. When I was growing up, in the 80s, I remember First Lady Nancy Reagan say no to drugs. I mean, my goodness, there was a video or a commercial all the time on the effects of that. we need to start doing that about early childhood education for parents. I think everybody in the room agrees that we as a parent want the best for our children, and sometimes we're praying, goodness, I hope I didn't screw up my kid, especially if you see that movie, No Small Matter. You're like, oh my gosh, is my kid okay? Because you could have done maybe more. And I think parents don't realize that their children start learning, and we can't wait until, you know, the pediatricians get it together or we as the teachers get it together. It has to be a wide effort where this is being communicated to all in mass media about the importance of early childhood education and the return on investment for society. And it's just best for all as we all continue to get into retirement. I mean, where are we going to get our next workforce from? And instead of being reactive, we need to start being proactive. And so it's talking to our policymakers and figuring out what media campaign is going to reach our parents. It should be on buses, TVs, laundromats, and also promoting where can you take your child and why should you take your child. You know, our babies are the most important things. As a mother of 4, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, is this person going to watch this child the way I would? Maybe not, you know, but they are going to be in the best quality education so that we can continue to fuel the workforce and as well continue to provide consistent, good quality child care to the child who deserves it.
2 comments, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I really feel like until we solve this workforce problem, we can build these beautiful facilities and have great curriculum and all sorts of things, but without a skilled, high-quality teacher to work with the children, we're going to be struggling. So that's one thing. We've been really lucky. Oh, go ahead.
Is the answer to that money? Obviously, money's
partially,
crucial.
I think.
Is there
it's
more
really
to the
important.
answer than money?
Well, I think people don't view early childhood necessarily as a profession. They may view it as babysitting. I think a lot of people, just like you said, what do you do with these babies? It's babysitting, and that's why we're paying you $10 an hour. But so I think there's a couple of things, shifting perspective on what it means to work with young children, and then money. The other comment I wanted to make is we're really fortunate to be the recipient of a grant that's called Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships. And it's really enabled us to work with our partners to increase access to high-quality infant and toddler care in Milwaukee. So we can support our partners with things that they cannot afford on the child care subsidy rate. They don't get enough money to do a lot of the things that need to be done, and that's true for most child care. So we provide coaching and professional development for teachers and some supplies for the classroom and the family support services that Head Start is required to provide, and the comprehensive services like making sure children have a medical and dental home and the mental health services are available to them. So that's been a really successful program, but it's small. It's, you know, we have 9 partners and there's lots more to be done in Milwaukee.
Same question I asked Professor Magnuson. What's your perspective on the word trauma? We'll start with, we'll go the other way this time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
You got a lot of families that are really hurting.
Right, and I think the key for us is making sure our staff understands what that means for families and the ways we can work with families to support them when they're dealing with trauma. So we do a lot of training with our staff about that. But I think someone had said earlier, we have to think about our own trauma and be very sensitive to ourselves and see ourselves and our biases, and I think that's really important too, to be reflective on what you're bringing to the relationships you have with families who've experienced trauma.
Do you feel, particularly at your 2 big centers, you're capable of responding to what the kids need or the parents need? I mean, you're not psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers.
Right. Well, we do have staff who are certified in infant mental health and in behavior support, so they're able to respond to some families. And then we're also fortunate to have our partners as well. So, for example, in our 29th Street site, just opened in October was the Next Step Clinic, which is a collaboration between Marquette and Mental Health America, and they're going to be providing mental health services to children and families out of our building there in Metcalf Park. So it's not just for our families, but for any families who need it in the area. So are we capable? I think we're doing a pretty good job, but I think there's a lot more that needs to be done.
I think for us, you know, trauma it depends. Every family is different. And we do have our partners. We try to reduce the trauma and the stress when our parents come into our center. So some of the things that we do is we provide all of the formula at no cost. We provide the diapers, the wipes, up to the age of we potty train them until they don't need it. And so we really try to look at really understanding what is it that the family needs. We have a clinic on site. We partner with the 16th Street Clinic. We have a nurse practitioner, a pediatrician, comes in to look at our babies when they're ill. In the event that the parent, we know our parents and the environment that they work in. It's not like I can get a call and say, I got to go pick up my child, they're sick. They're working, in hospitality, in labor, where sometimes we may not be able to get a hold of the parent. So for us, it's providing that comprehensive care and really understanding what our families need to try to reduce the stress and trauma that they may experience, because everyone is different and are coming with a different set of issues. And for us, I think the vision is to continue to stay student-centered and to support the family to remove that stress and that trauma, whether that is trying to find a job and how do you skill up, how do you find your first home or buy your first home so that you're stable within the community, and easy things just as diapers. I mean, we have parents who they put the last diaper on their child, and the child comes into us, and that's the first thing we do is change that. But for them to not have to worry of the diaper bag, the formula, the food, and the car seat, it's trying to reduce as much as possible so that we can reduce that stress. And dental is also a big part of it. Teaching parents, you would think, what does dental have to do with a newborn? Well, believe it or not, you got to clean their gums. And so for us, it's how do you do that? And partnering with Ascension also helps with the Dental Smile program that we have. So it's different.
I don't have a lot to add, except that obviously it's important to be able to recognize trauma and the trauma-informed care, but I think it's also about reducing the stress and building networks of support. You can identify trauma, but if there's no network of support, if there's no prescription, I don't mean a magic prescription that's going to cure all the ills, but access to resources is just such a huge issue. It's difficult for families to deal with the issues that are coming up every day. They don't have access to food. They don't have access to health care. If they don't have access to another human being that's a close friend that they can talk to about this. So trying to provide that holistic array of resources is difficult and it's complicated, but that doesn't mean it's any less essential. And a lot of that happens outside of the home, but nothing is a substitute for what's going on in the home. So that's why we're very high on getting people in, but also with programs like HIPPY going into the home on their territory where they feel most comfortable and talking about whatever they want to talk about. And in most cases, parents want to talk about how do I do the best for my child. Parents really care about their kids. So many of them want the best for their child. Almost all of them want the best for their child. But huge numbers don't know what it is I need to do. They didn't have the role models themselves. And so that's for us, the primary direction.
And have the willingness and capacity to do better, if given the right inputs or coaching or mentoring or whatever.
And I guess that? And I think that's the strength of what all of our agencies and many others who are with agencies here to do is it's been the relationship building. People who come in, it's not just here's your thing and go. It's this is what we have to offer. What do you need? How can we help? And building that relationship. All sorts of things get unfolded when you start to fold back the layers. But you can't make people fold back the layers. They've got to wanna. And the prerequisite to wanna is trust.
So a version of the question, another question I asked Dr. Magnuson is you each have just been named the all-powerful head of early childhood efforts in Milwaukee. What's the first thing you would do? Start with Laura this time.
I think I would, well, we would continue to do what we're doing because we know it works, but I think from a larger, wide spectrum.
I'm talking about everybody.
Policy, I would say policy needs to change. I'll tell you a story. I had lunch with a student of mine who is now 30. She was a 7th and 8th grade student of mine. And she said to me, you know, Ms. Gutierrez, I screwed up. I got pregnant my sophomore year that I was at Marquette. And, you know, I know we needed to finish college because you guys were helping, or UCC was helping. And so I went to ask for assistance, thinking, can I get W-2? Can I get some type of help and continue to stay in school? The response she received was, if you want assistance, you have to drop out of college. And for her, she goes, that was an eye-opener, because her response was, wouldn't it be better if you just helped me in this transition and I stayed at Marquette and finished? And they said, yeah, but that's not the way it works. And she did. She's doing great. She's bought her first house. She's, you know, single mom, thriving, working at Marquette University, amazing, being a great leader that she is. But I think we have to look at policy and stop putting all these layers that makes it so difficult, not only for agencies like ours to continue to be a high-quality performing rating, but also how do you remove the layers for parents and make it easier for them to apply? You know, it's such a cumbersome application to be able to do that when you can see, and by looking at them, you know that there is a need. So I think starting at that, and again, just really continuing to we need an awareness campaign about the importance of early childhood education and the return on investment.
It's hard to build a skyscraper if you're going to start construction on the 5th floor. There's got to be a foundation. And I understand how important it is to invest in our schools. But if a child goes to school without the requisite social, emotional, and literacy foundation, if they can't sit still in a classroom, if they don't know how to share their toys, and they start with a 20,000-word gap, I don't care what the schools do, most of those students are going to fail. Some will overcome those obstacles, but we're talking about big picture. Investing in that first 5 years pays a lot more dividends than any other single investment I can think of. And that doesn't mean the school systems aren't critically important. My mom was a teacher. I have taught. I understand the importance of quality schools and the importance of quality teachers, one at a time in those classrooms and the relationships they build. But you got to have something to start with. And starting with means quality early child development. And quality early child development can take place in a lot of ways that we're all talking about. So that would be a significant reallocation of resources, investing in not just quality early childhood centers, but all different aspects of how we develop quality early child education in the home, in the schools, in the neighborhoods.
So you didn't ask the how. I don't know what the how is, but it's no surprise that I...
The details.
Okay, yes. What I would want to happen is that teachers are paid commensurate with the work they are doing, just like they are in many other countries, and that they're respected like they are in other countries, like they are not respected in the United States. That's one thing I do. And the other thing I would do is make sure all our families have jobs that pay them a family supporting wage, because I often think if our families just had more money, most of their problems would just be solved. And so that's what I would do. I don't know how, but I would.
Let's take some questions if people have them. I'd urge you to be kind of brief and stick to the form of a question. We'll go about another 15 minutes or so. Yes, ma'am. I think if you press down on that thing in the middle there on the arrow, then we can all hear you.
Okay, my name is Bianca Shaw. I work for the state's Department of Children and Families. I am the director of the Office of Urban Development. I say that what qualifies me to be here is that I'm an advocate from Milwaukee, and I'm a mother, and I've struggled to afford to keep my child in quality child care. As a mother, I'm wanting to work myself out of a low-income situation and thinking that getting a good job, as you're saying, there are obstacles that are placed before you. Even with having a male inside the home and receiving the support you need to do what you feel is best. So I wanted to kind of just comment really, no question, on the trauma piece. I think that for me as I sit here, I think about the trauma of education as it relates to the African American community and how it was illegal for African Americans to learn for a long time. So the mindset of individuals
regarding some individuals may not be where some of us think it should be, and that is a process. As long as it was withheld from us, it may take just as long for us to become as important. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened, because there are many educated African Americans in this country today. But just for me, even coming into my position, I'm appointed in my position. And when I first came in, we were dealing with a lot of trauma-informed care. And when I hear that, I hear professionals and educators being taught how to deal with people that are traumatized versus dealing with the systems that traumatize people. So I would just challenge this group to think about not the trauma in the people, because that's there and it's true, but there is more trauma in the systems that the people have to go through to operate. For example, when, Laura was talking about the young lady that wanted to go to college and could not receive the funds, a young woman that wants to stay with the father of her child but cannot because Section 8 won't allow her to. And so I think that for me, I do like Vroom, because the one thing with Vroom is what they'll do is they'll give the parent a mirror. And it says that you have what it takes to take care of your child. And so the thing of this is as my position, it is my obligation to support people to do what they feel is best for their children. And that Young Star is under DCF, right? But who is defining what is quality? You understand what I mean? In 5 through 206, we have 70 child care providers in that area. And majority of those kids do not go to the 3 and 4 star because there is a trust issue with the educational system and the African American community. And so I feel that we have to get at the root of these problems if we really want to fix the problems. And I am here to help solve the problems. I'm not just bringing you issues. I'm here to support in any way that I can. But at the same time, we have to begin to deal with these issues at the root of the problem. Families need support to do what they feel is best for their families. If I don't know what I'm going to feed my child tonight, I'm not thinking about a quality 5-star daycare. If I don't know where my rent is going to come from, I personally have to choose between paying a car note and my car insurance versus paying $1,100 per month to keep my child in a quality daycare. I lived walking distance, so I can do that. But it's just the sacrifices that we have to make as minorities, as African Americans, to try to do what we feel is best. It's a struggle. So I just need, in this room, I look around, our county is 68% African American. That we don't reflect that today. And I'm just going to challenge us to say that we have to be able to reach back and pull individuals that have walked through this to come to these tables to share their experiences so that we can fix these issues. We have the resources, we have the collaboration and all of the infrastructure there. We just have to unite in a way that we can make this sustainable for years to come. So, thank you.
Valuable thoughts, and thank you. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, push. Hi. Good morning. Good morning. It's still morning. My name is Monica Kelsey Brown. I am the Assistant Superintendent for the Brown Deer School District. I do not have a question. I have a comment. And I want to say, first of all, thank you to the Marquette University Law Center for putting on this awesome, I'll call it a seminar today. So thank you for that. As educators in school districts, we are most interested in understanding what early childhood could and should look like in order to create a successful pipeline for our students. But I wanted to say thank you specifically to Laura, because you were the first out of many of the presenters to talk about the trust piece. That's really huge in connecting with families and communities to not only to not do activities or strategies to the families, but working alongside to implement these strategies and activities with the families. So when they understand we're here to work with them, I think they're more amenable to what we have to offer. So that's one. I want to say thank you for that. And the other piece I want to add is we know that Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the nation. And I want to challenge all of us to think about challenging our own inherent biases as it relates to individuals who live in poverty. Our perception of them at the onset of what we see sometimes negates what we really know we need to do for the families in order to be able to help them. And so this is my superintendent, Dr. Kerr. We challenge our biases all the time. Like, you know, are we doing something to kids that puts, or families, that puts barriers in the way for them to be successful, or are we more adamant about what is it that we can remove, or what barriers can we remove from these families or students or even teachers in that manner to make sure that we're all successful in this work. So thank you to everyone. But Laura, you were the first one to talk about trust, and so I think that's really important. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being a great partner. Dr. Kerr and yourself have been great to UCC, so thank you for that.
Good. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. We're longer on comments than questions. Yes.
I run a daycare that is 90% refugee population, and you know, trauma is with the refugee population. It's something that they face besides language and other barriers. But one thing that works for us in the daycare is the community support that the refugee has. Even though they are low income, they have that support where everybody is helping the family. Not I, me, just you. It's the sister, the mom, the grandma, the uncle. Everybody's involved. If it's employment, they're there to take them to work, help them interview. You know, so it's I think that support that helps with family that it's lacking, that I see lacking other community. Even financial support. They pinch in money and put it and help one that if the car broke down or if they need their bills to pay. So I think that you know, being a refugee myself, that helped us take the barrier and make it easy.
You're talking about support from kind of the smaller circle around you. Do you feel like you have support from the broader circle of agencies, government, social service groups?
They might be, but because of the lack of language, it's hard to get that resources for. So for our center, I'm doing most of the work in terms of filling out green card, helping them ease. You know, this is you're not being deported. You have this status. You're so just having that support, someone that speaks their language and understand the culture. But I don't see that available just because of the language barriers. It might be there, but they're not aware of that.
Thank you. Others? In the back, Steve Adams.
Thank you very much. I'm not a child care expert. I'm more a systems guy, but very interesting. So I want to know, I heard all the speakers always say, especially in the specific examples about when you're helping parents and trying to get them on programs and funding opportunities, that they're always given these complicated forms and all that to deal with. So I want to know, is anybody out there looking at that? How do we uncomplicate the application process to make it easier for parents to apply for these various programs and funding?
Well, we're working, all the Head Start organizations are working with WIC right now to see if we can simplify that process for parents so that they don't have to come and apply for Head Start and then apply for WIC, and that it can be more integrated. So that's a little small thing that we're doing, but we're trying that, and hopefully if that works, we can apply that to other systems.
And I would say at our center as well, you know, we are a public charter school, and so we're serving 1,700 students that come with different financial needs, especially at the age of 6 weeks to 3. And so something our center is doing is looking at, if you qualify for Head Start, what does that application look like on top of this application and this one, so that we can gather all of it at one time and not have you come in 3 to 4 times, but kind of say to you, you know, not to say, well, you're a W-2, you go over here, you're a Head Start parent, you go over here, and you're a private pay, you come here. This is your financial aid vehicle. We're going to walk you through, help you fill out the application, one and done. And your child is going to get services immediately. So that's how we're trying to navigate it, along with working with Tracy and some other partners on the whole WIG program, because it's cumbersome.
I agree with all of that, but I think there's something that precedes it, and that is you have to be able to build a relationship. You have to be able to have somebody trust you. And so before any of that can happen, I think what we all focus on is creating an individual trust with each individual who walks in the door. Otherwise, they're not going to share with you. Otherwise, they're going to be frustrated easily. They're going to go somewhere else where they feel that there is a relationship. Once you break through that barrier and people can really talk to each other, you find out what the problems are. And then to be able to provide a holistic array of responses. It's not a simple, this is the one thing that's going to solve everything in your life. It doesn't work that way. But it begins with having a relationship where you can have a give and take and a share, and then start working on a comprehensive array of services.
One more question or comment? Ms. Darrell.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about language and literacy this morning, and we all understand, I think, that language matters. And as long as we continue, some of us continue to refer to the work that we're doing as daycare, we're going to perpetuate the image of glorified babysitters. The work that is happening in these programs, those high-quality programs, is early education and care. And we need to start thinking about it that way. At the national level, there's been 15 organizations working to professionalize the field of early childhood education. And we're recommending that the revenue, that the subsidy be restructured, because we cannot continue to fund early childhood on the backs of the people working in the programs. We can't continue that. That's been the problem thus far. And I think we're recommending restructuring it to look more like how the public school system is funded. We need to rethink that. We talked a lot about innovation this morning and funding innovative opportunities. Let's be innovative in thinking about how we fund early childhood education. And let's be thoughtful about how we reference the work that's being done and the people doing the work in those programs. I don't think anyone that's working in a child care program will tell you that they take care of days. They are caring for and educating children.
I should add, give me the correct title. Ann Terrell is the incoming, or the president-elect of the National Association of... For the Education of Young Children. For the Education of Young Children. So, and a former MPS person, college-level instructor here, someone who's important to listen to.
And an original supporter of the hippie program in Milwaukee.
Excuse me. The rabbi of my congregation, one of his most frequent themes is, do one more thing. You know, whatever you're doing, add to it, build on it, do better. And you say, I'm running 24 hours a day. He said, I don't care. Do something more and something good. And so the people who are here today, perhaps every one of you, I certainly wouldn't want to exclude anybody, you're doing a lot. You're involved in this. You care about this. You show up at events like this. But more important, just the roles you're playing, whether it's in a government organization, social services, philanthropic organizations, community advocacy, whatever it might be, you're doing a lot. But ultimately, listen to my rabbi, you got to do one more thing. You got to find something more to do. We need to do better. I don't think there's anyone here who disputes that, because look at how much need there is. So that's the question I'd ask you, both individually and looking at the broader community, to take with you as we break up this session is what is something more that each of us can do, and what is something more that all of us can do. Where do we go from here? This is not intended to be just a lot of talk. I thought it was really good talk, but if it doesn't spark something, then it isn't so valuable. So I hope you'll take that with you. I'd be glad to get your thoughts on what ought to be done, and particularly, as I said before, what maybe we can do at Marquette Law School, Marquette University, in convening people and helping do some of that sparking of the conversation and the action. You are a really good group. You've been a really good group this morning. I thank all of you for being here. I thank Tracy, Laura, Tom, going back to Dr. Magnuson and Dr. Suskind, Mike Goucher, Rita Aleman, the whole events crew here at the law school, which makes these things run so seamlessly. The two deans, Dean Kearney and Dean Hank, who have been so supportive. We only are able to do these things because we have a green light to do them. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As I said, there's lunch outside. You're welcome to hang around here. You're welcome to go out and find something more to do. Thank you.